Okay, let's get this started, eh? I don't know where I'm supposed to call. I guess here?
Hey, you.
Hey, how's it going?
Is it? I mean, I guess we can do it here.
Where I just didn't know where we were doing it.
In the waiting room in Rob's Discord. Are you in Rob's Discord?
I'm not in Rob's Discord.
Mm. Let me see. Here, give me a second. I'll just tell him to come in here. It's not that.
Gotcha. Do 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 do. Do 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 do.
All right, everybody on.
I'm here.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you loud and clear.
What's happening? Third way, perhaps let me check this real quick. To slide this, can I do the I'd prefer to do the triangle type, but I guess
Yeah, that's really weird. Let's do that.
Whatever. This is fine. How you doing today, Dylan?
You know, I'm doing okay. I'm getting to play some video games on stream for a while, which I've been wanting to do since forever.
What are you playing?
I'm playing Breath of the Wild. It's the Zelda game.
I saw you were putting pictures of it up. I was like, I don't know what that is though. But
You don't know what that was?
it looked like an elf, but I didn't know it was a Zelda game, Breath of the Wild.
Yeah, that's Link, the main character from all the old games.
See,
Were you more of a ball and stick guy?
Yeah, I remember Link to the Past and the original Zelda. I beat those, but that was Ocarina of Time was the last one I played. No, Majora's Mask. I beat that too.
I
All right.
started more like Skyward Sword. That was a lot later. It was like 2010.
Okay.
You guys are agreeing way too much. The audience wants to see you guys at each other's throats. So let me go ahead and start this. All right. So first, I want to thank everyone for being here. We haven't quite agreed on the name of the panel, but for now, thank you for tuning into the roundtable with Rob Noerr. I also want to thank Dylan for agreeing to be the first guest on here. I know I can speak for Rob when I say thank you and really appreciate it, Dylan. Now, the way this will work: 2 topics, 1 hour each. I will let each panelist introduce themselves, their political leanings, where to find them, all that good stuff. And after which I will present the topic. Then each panelist gets to give their thoughts on said topic in a short intro. After the hour has ended, I will then ask each panelist to give their closing thoughts, 2 minutes for both intro and outro, and 45 minutes into each topic, we'll go ahead and take questions from the audience. So getting around there, I'll go ahead and peek at everybody's chat, and I'll pull some questions from there. And Dylan, as our guest, you will get to have the first word on your topic and the last word on your topic as well. I'll be moderating, and we'll be interjecting with when there's either a miscommunication, and maybe I can help with that, or if the discussion's getting a little bit too messy and we need to get things back in order. Then afterward, we'll take a couple questions from the audience. As far as language goes, as Dylan says, I'm not going to moderate your niceness, but, just, we all know, I'm sure you guys, I don't really have to tell you guys, no racist slurs, Twitch terms of service, all that good stuff. That's about everything that needs to be covered. Does anybody have any questions?
No, and I just wanted to let you know, Dylan, this is totally Aftershocks show once it starts. So he's going to bring the hammer down on me if I'm being ridiculous. So that's how it's going to work. So
got it. And I'm sure Aftershock has no problem shutting up a libtard, so I'll be good too.
Which would be good, yeah.
All right. So if there's no questions, let's go ahead and get into the first topic. All right. So China. China has become a growing concern for many Americans. While China plays the 50-year game, it seems that the United States is playing the 2 to 4-year game, leading many to fear how strong China is and is planning to become. And after 4 years of Trump and his constant push on China, whether that be good moves or bad moves, and with the new administration, leaves many wondering if Biden will be better or worse on China. Panelists, will Biden be better or worse on China? Dylan, as the guest, I will go ahead and give you the first word on this. 2 minutes. Go ahead.
Okay. So basically, I believe that Biden's philosophy and record and Trump's is much better than Trump's philosophy and record. I think Trump's history as a businessman has heavily impacted how he governed. He ran on the idea that I'm a businessman who can run things straight. He famously said on the campaign trail that I'm going to wipe out America's debt, and he has governed on foreign policy in the same way as a businessman. And through his career in like housing and development, he learned this thing about personal relationships and how important they are. Developing those with other CEOs and viewing them as opposing CEOs that he needs to develop relationships with so they can work and compete on good terms. Which is a good part of foreign policy, is to know and have personal relationships with foreign leaders. But I think when it came to the issue of China, he overextended his hand, gave Xi too many favors during the early parts of the administration, and caved on issues like the Uyghurs, Hong Kong, and Taiwan. And there's multiple reports from within the administration, according to Bannon, John Bolton, and even his son-in-law, about the type of things he would say about Xi, and about specifically the Uyghurs in Hong Kong and Taiwan, about how he doesn't want it to come up, he doesn't want to talk about these issues, and he would actually lambaste high-ranking officials that went to Taiwan to represent the United States because he wanted to maintain this personal relationship with Xi. And I think the fact that only was in this later term that he actually started to condemn Xi, which he has publicly noted was because of his arranging in trade deals, has hurt this idea that we were actually trying to campaign for human rights with China, and undermined, I think, the argument for his trade war, which also was not successful. Where I think Biden's freedom of navigation operations, him being part of that, which has been the most successful strategy, and his recent working with India, Australia, Japan, and Korea to actually form a counterance to China in the region, I think is a much more effective strategy. Multilateralism is going to be much more effective when dealing with China in the region, since we don't have territory there in the Indo-Pacific, comparative to unilateralism, which Biden, being a realist, Trump following somewhat realist unilateralism, much like John Bolton in many instances, is not going to be effective. That's enough for my opening statement. I can get into specifics and sources and stuff like that later.
Sure.
All right, well said. Rob, 2 minutes. Go ahead.
Okay, so I don't know how anyone could think that Biden's going to be tougher on China than Trump. First off, China was the weakest member of DX, who then ended up siding with Vince McMahon, which, as we know, Donald Trump actually went. No, I won't speak ill of the dead. So first off, let me say this. I actually think Biden will be much worse on China than Donald Trump was. And there's several reasons for thinking this. The first thing we have to agree on is, what does it mean to be worse on China? So I think that in order to determine, we will know at some point, it might be 3-4 years in the future, but we'll know who's right about this argument, Dylan or I, by the position of China in the world. Will China have more power? Will they have stopped their abuse on Uyghurs? Will they have stopped their abuse on Hong Kong and on Taiwan? Or will they have continued those abuses and continued to be stronger than the United States and to catch up to us even further? I think that they will. I think that in this next 4 years that they're going to advance, that they're going to perceive Biden is weak. And I think that they basically own Biden's son, as we'll get into, and that we could already see the lip service that Biden's playing, where he refused to call them an adversary and called them more of a rival. He didn't want to speak ill of them over and over again. And I think that we'll see that as it plays out. It's easy for Biden to suggest, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, and talk about policies that he's pushing. Remember, Joe Biden famously said over and over and over again, one of the first things he would do was make sure there weren't kids in cages. So it's hard to take him at face value about how he's going to get tough on China and he's going to do this and that. Now, having said that, was Trump perfect on China? No. Trump took the first step, which was we finally had a leader of the United States that was willing to stick up for the United States and call China out as the threat they were. He's had generals such as General Spalding that led a task force that was responsible for challenging China in 5G and how they were going to use that to collect information on Americans, which they continue to do so. He was hampered in that effort at almost every turn by establishment people in the Republican and Democratic Party. Oh, by the way, that will be behind Joe Biden with the policies that he's issuing. So I think that although Trump wasn't perfect, and although many of the things, and the buck does stop with him to some degree, I think he was hampered by establishment Washington, but still his aggressive posturing towards China was good in calling out the abuses of China. And Joe Biden will have the exact opposite posturing on issues that matter, which will embolden China and cause them to be worse.
All right. Well said. All right, panelists, it is open to roundtable debate. Go ahead.
Okay, so I just want to be clear that it's hard to say, like, well, if China continues to rise, that means Joe Biden has failed, because China has continued to rise under Trump, and that hasn't failed. There's only so much a U.S. president can do to unseat that, and I don't necessarily think China collapsing would be a good thing for the world. Like when we say that, like we would say a good thing for the United States president to do isn't just to like seek the destruction of another country, but to secure our national security concerns and try to protect human rights around the world. For example, let's say China continued to grow economically, right? Continue to expand economically, continue to do well economically, but let's say they stopped abuse. We were able to protect Taiwan through 4 to 8 years. We were able to get an international coalition to protect the South China Sea. China still grows economically, so I think those parameters you laid out on like how we will know if you failed or succeeded is I think not exactly as clear cut as we should make them.
But let me ask this, right? Has China taken over Taiwan during the Trump administration?
No, they have not.
Right. So to just say, well, if they continue 4 years from now to have not done so, that's a victory for Biden.
Yeah, that's why.
Then the same could be.
Yeah, okay. But sure. my point mostly was we can't say like this is the line where we will know it succeeded as if like China has fallen and we have won this great. It's gonna be it's a lot of like more specifics. So I just want to be clear, like revisiting this 4 to 8 years from now, it's not gonna be like if China has a bigger economy than Biden failed, because that's going to happen no matter who.
I would agree with that. I agree with that. But so let's look at it in this way: if China has more influence on the world stage vis-a-vis the United States, would you say that would show that Biden was ineffective on this?
More influence on the world stage. I would say that if Biden was not able to do that, I would say, you know what? I would say that was a failure. Now we could debate what type of influence, like soft power, hard power.
Sure.
But I would say just generally, if somehow China outflanked us to be the kind of unipolar type leader of the world, then it's I would say that's a failure of sorts. Yes.
Because here's the sort of thing that. The truth of the matter is, when it comes to things like this, there probably won't be a black and white. I'm sure you would probably agree with that. So what do we think about in 4 years if maybe the Chinese have stopped interning Uyghur Muslims, but their influence in agencies like the UN, the World Health Organization, and a lot of allies that formerly looked to the United States as a leader are increasingly looking to China as a leader? Is that a victory because they stopped the abuse of Uyghurs?
Then you would say it's kind of like a I think it's Pyrrhic victory, where you win in one area, you lose in another. For example, let's say, like if you said for your own self that Trump was not perfect on China, but you would think Trump is better, and you would say he was a better option. So that's when I'm not proposing the idea that Biden's perfect on China. There's probably some things for example, I would say the Scarborough Shoal incident and how that was handled would be one example. I would be immediately able to concede that would be an example of, I think, Biden being part of administration, not speaking up about something, and being a part of a failure. I just think the vast majority of his experience and what he's doing so far is basically everything I wanted, and sometimes even too aggressive for me, actually, from my worldview.
Okay. So let's then first talk about Biden's record, and then we'll get to Trump's record. So on Biden's record, would you say that we should hold to what the previous administration he was part of as part of Biden's decisions on China? So when Biden was vice president, the 8 years of Obama, should we include that in Biden's record on dealing with China?
It depends, and the reason why I say it depends and put an asterisk there is because, for example, a lot of people want to pin Libya on Biden, but Biden was the one member of the administration that we know was outspoken against intervening in Libya. So if we have records of he was in the administration like, hey, let's not do this, this is a bad idea, let's not do this, then how much can we actually blame him for it when he was trying to be a counter friction to bad decisions? So I would say mostly yes. Of course, we need to remember the buck doesn't stop with him.
Right.
But if there's documented evidence of him pushing against something, then we should actually give him credit for that.
Okay, and so let me just ask you straight up before we get into specifics.
Because I can actually just say, I just admitted Scarborough Shoal, I just place some blame on China. Joe Biden, so that would be an example.
Which is fair. Yeah, which is totally fair. But are you aware of any of Obama's posturing towards China or policy towards China that Biden was vocally against? I'm not, but I'm not saying that didn't happen.
You would have to, if you bring up an instance, then maybe if it jogs my memory, I'll try to see if I can find a source on it. But there's a lot. But I could say that I can remember things he was very, very vocally in support of. Great example would be freedom of navigation operations was something that Biden was supportive of, which I still think to this day is the most effective thing we have ever done when it comes to Indo-Pacific strategy. And I think expanding that, which Biden is set to do, is like a great example. I think, yes, that's a great example of why I think Biden would be better than Trump.
Did Trump rescind that?
He didn't rescind it. He continued it, but he didn't do what was necessary to make it effective. Let me tell you. So Trump didn't approach it through a multilateral framework. He saw it as taking American ships, running it through Indo-Pacific waters, and asserting that is international territory. Where Biden says we need to do American ships, Filipino ships, Indian ships, Japanese ships, all these ships. That's why he's having meetings with I believe, I forget what exactly the organization's called, but it was an organization from I think in the 80s that is trying to revive with India, with Australia, with Japan, with the Philippines. He's doing these meetings because he wants to start a counterance to that influence in the South China Sea, because China claims 80% of the territory, but those claims are completely off the wall. And so that's a great example where I think his foreign policy strategy is going to be much more effective, because I don't think I know of anybody who thinks that we can take China on when it comes to issues like the South China Sea alone, when our country is just thousands of miles away and our allies are right there.
Okay, so I will admit, I have not researched heavily since 2004, the South China Sea, when I was doing debate. So this has to do, correct me if I'm wrong, this has to do with trading, right? And does this also have to do with Taiwan?
It has to do with
the posturing it's considered encirclement kind of Taiwan, correct?
It's not only Taiwan. It includes, there's claims on Filipino islands, which leads to the harassing of their fishermen. There's claims on Vietnamese territory, Burmese territory, Malaysian territory, Japanese territory, Taiwanese territory. So literally everybody over there is getting they claim 80% of the sea, which has been rejected in multiple international courts.
Okay, so the point is, it's already been rejected, right? And I don't think that there hasn't been military conflicts under the Trump administration there. But I will take your word. I have no reason to disagree that there's been posturing, but I don't think that there's been any actual
a war,
hot firing, right?
No, there's not been any incidents. The incidents I think of during the Bill Clinton administration that is not happening. It's the closest I could give you to an example is the Chinese military ships harassing Filipino fishermen, blowing them with water cannons, ramming them, and Chinese ships violating Taiwanese airspace during multiple times during the Trump administration. But that's also happened during the Biden administration. So they're prodding for weak points.
Okay, so the reason I bring it up is this: I'm not belittling that, and certainly if you were a Filipino fisherman or something like that, that is an incredibly important issue to you. And I definitely think that we could both concede that China is bullying and terrible with human rights record and things like that when it comes to issues like this and others. However, on the grand scheme of things, that's far less important than so many other things that we see with U.S.-China policy, such as trade disputes, such as intellectual property theft, and a bunch of other things, which we'll get to in a minute. I think that if we're going to say that Biden, unless we have a reason or unless we have proof that he objected to something, there is no doubt in my mind that under the 8-year term of Obama, that China ate our lunch. They not only increased trade deficits, they not only engaged in all sorts of intellectual property theft, they not only engaged in kind of doing things to increase their power and their influence on the world stage, but they basically did so with near impunity. So do you think that the Obama years were a success on China?
So let me just say, I want to disagree with your first premise that this isn't. I would actually say the South China Sea is probably my main issue when it comes to China.
Okay.
And the reason why is the South China Sea, which they claim 80%. There's multiple reasons. Number one, because a lot of the nations involved are our allies, and it's important to have this developed relationship with them. And number two, 25 to 33% of world trade passes through the South China Sea. So if your issue, which it sounds to be, is international trade, this right here is probably the biggest example of this affecting international trade, because these international waters are extremely important for international trade to freely flow through this. If they get 80% of this, these artificial islands, and can actually get a solid claim on these lands, not only would it be a complete just kicking out of international law and norms and the bullying of our allies, which we have treaties with, of defensive treaties with the Philippines, for example, it would also mean they would basically have a stranglehold on where 33% of the world's trade goes through, which if your main issue seems to be economics, this is majorly important for us to protect international waters, which our goods and our money is extremely dependent on as a consumer-based economy.
Okay, but still, even given that is small potatoes when it comes to something like the massive amounts of intellectual property theft that allowed China to catch up so rapidly to the United States, other disputes and things we've had, such as currency manipulation, tariffs, things like that, and U.S. products that directly diminish the United States. Remember, one of the reasons that China is the biggest adversary to the United States is just how much of the wealth.
1 second. You said tariffs and what was the other one? Copyright? I just wanted to write this down. So
intellectual property theft.
Intellectual. Right. Okay. Continue.
Right. So, and there's also all sorts of other things. For example, it's just came up recently, the effects of Chinese spies on the United States, not just with people like Eric Swalwell, which we could joke about if we want, but also their massive influence in our academic system. So I forget the name of the kind of face that China puts on this, but there's all sorts of money that's flowing in to our elite universities to basically teach pro-Chinese propaganda, to have China help influence where our academia goes. And not only that, but there's been several high-profile professors in the United States and in Canada that have been arrested for giving secrets out and research projects that they were working on at their university in behest of the United States government to China. So all of these things directly impact us more.
Can I respond to these things? Like, that's just 4 points, so it's a lot. So the first thing I would like to say is the thing is, the intellectual property right and the copyright theft, the amount of money worth that is being stolen does not nearly match in any percent of the imagination the amount of trade and goods that travel through the South China Sea. It's a large amount, and it is an issue. In fact, it was actually during the meeting, the first thing that our diplomats said after sanctions were placed on the Hong Kong and mainland China officials hours before the meeting. By the way, today I think actually more sanctions coordinated with the European Union were placed on Chinese officials by the Biden administration. The first one of the main issues he brought up was the Uyghurs, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and then intellectual property rights. Those were the first 4 things that he brought up. So those seems to be the 4 things. It was the first 4 things he brings up, 4 main priorities. And then he also seems to be good on the South China Sea, which is connected to the economic issues you seem to bring it up. When it comes to the academics, I will say that I think that definitely any like spy rings or anything is a problem, but spy rings existed under Biden, spy rings existed under Trump, spy rings will exist under this as well. During international actors, these spy rings will work. Now, the thing that's difficult about this is neither of us will ever know how effective either of them are really at combating spy rings, because they're not just going to be like, oh, here's all the data of all the spies we've captured, here's their names, here's their photographs. So I actually can't really tell you like how effective either is going to be in doing that. When it comes to academics, I personally, and this is probably a complete break in worldview from you, is I think the more Chinese students we allow into our universities, the better. And the main reason is I believe in internationalism. I believe in globalism. And I think the transfer by having Chinese students come to America and learn about American ideas, learn in American universities, talk with American people, that type of person-on-person interaction is not only important for stopping conflict by humanizing the other. Definitely when we see the huge spike in anti-Asian hate crimes in the United States, it would be a great example of like a need to humanize these people. But number 2, I would also say it's important for like our ideas about democracy and freedom to be translated to these people so they maybe want to try it out for themselves if they go home. And as somebody who cares about human rights, this would be something I would want to push.
You?
Yes.
That's not what I'm talking about, though. I don't have a problem with foreign students, regardless of what country they are, attending university here. The problem is with them financing these universities. For example, Harvard got over $1 billion from China. Then we saw a professor from Harvard that was basically arrested as a spy from China, right? So all of this money that, oh, by the way, went unreported, to which the Trump administration was investigating this underreporting of monies received. And what this is like China understands that the way to beat the United States isn't through a hot war, it's through a culture war. And they understand by getting their talents into our education system. Now, this is kind of getting off track because the reason I bring this stuff up is by any measure, China massively increased in strength in almost every way that matters under the 8 years of the Obama administration. So I was actually shocked that you were like, well, Biden's experience on China and his record 100%. On China, his record is trash. Well, like for 30 years before the Trump administration, basically every leader we had, whether it be Bush or the other Bush or Clinton or Obama, like they didn't say crap about China that was rising to be a bipolar power in the world to challenge our hegemony. And so Biden was part of that administration. Then when you couple that with Biden, even in the debates, unwilling to talk about China as a great adversary, instead wanting to focus more on Russia, which is total garbage. And then when you find the reports of, well, there's a bunch of reasons why. It turns out that Joe Biden's son was getting paid handsomely by the CCP, and that 10% of that money was being held for the big guy, which was probably Biden himself. It starts to give an equation of, geez, I wonder why Biden, although he's now suddenly paying lip service, he didn't do anything for 8 years previously on China, basically. And now he seems to be going softer on them than a country like Russia.
So I would like to say that first off, Biden, in his role during the Obama administration, there was a different mentality under Obama than there's going to be a mentality under a Biden administration. And we can see that shift in mentality. He has talked very openly about the need to a pivot to Asia, which is actually something I disagree with. I hate the idea of pivoting to Asia. This is something that I think that would more, please someone like you than someone like me, is the idea that he thinks that China is the rising geopolitical foe, then we need to concentrate our resources, our stuff, and everything, our ambassadorships, our offices, our everything, on trying to counter this rising geopolitical foe. Where me, personally, I think we can do that while also still doing stuff in the Middle East for stabilization projects, stuff to eventually have a clean and healthy pullout, which is something that I think more would please somebody like you than someone like me. That shift to Asia has been a heavy part of his foreign policy discussions and has been talked about by multiple people in his administration. So I would say that the mentality and the situation has changed. A lot of people, all of basically American politicians, have shifted on China. All of them. Basically everybody. Because when you looked at the Republican Party for the last, 10 to 20 years, it's been free trade. When you look at Obama, it's been, a lot of it's also been, we need to have healthy relationships with them, which is not something I necessarily disagree with. So and the thing is, Trump also carried a lot of this mentality during his administration until very late in his term. Taiwan, Hong Kong, Xinjiang, these are great examples of issues which he was very soft on until later in his term when he tried to basically pick up on it. He talked about openly how he didn't really want to talk about the Xinjiang issue because he was too busy negotiating trade that was compromising and putting price tags on people in concentration camps. Whereas in the Biden administration, and that's why he didn't have it for the first 3 years, he didn't have meetings about it. He has told people in his administration openly, I don't want to hear about Taiwan. I don't want to hear about Hong Kong. I don't want to hear about Xinjiang. Whereas in Biden, in the very first meeting, after hours before the meeting, which this was a little intense for me, he placed sanctions on officials, then goes to the meeting. First thing he says in front of the camera, he lists out the issues that they have with China. China then responds by pivoting to the issue of how black people are treated in the United States. And then Anthony Blinken responds by another pivot to Japan and Korea. That type of a meeting, and after waving the reporters back in to hear him respond to him. That I didn't expect. It's actually harder than I thought Biden would go. And I actually like starting off of a basis of somewhat decent negotiation and slowly building up. But this feels like the type of thing that would make someone like you happy.
Well, no, because see, this was the criticism that people had with Trump all the time. Trump dealt with things in a way that I think made sense when it came to foreign policy, in that he pressured allies knowing that they would be allies to do more. And then with egomaniac strongman dictators like Putin or Kim Jong-un or Xi, he appealed to their vanity or to their egos and tried to be chummy with them, yet was tough on them when it came to his actions. So with his words, he was chummy, yet then he put tariffs and all these things that were actually dangerous. I think that these strongman world leaders respected that more because they knew that Trump would come after them and harm them. I think that they will be emboldened. We talked about this the other night on the debate panel where you were like, this is almost unprecedented. It is unprecedented. China would have never had the nerve to come on U.S. soil and treat Trump administration officials like they did with the officials, Blinken and the rest of the people.
They did that before he was even president. They did that to him. A great example would be a great example is the Taiwan call, which there is a million ways that how the Taiwan call is proposed and said to have happened, but how the media accepts it. The media accepts it like this: Trump was stupid and he picked up a call. He didn't know what he was doing. He stumbles into it. Dumb, and he destroys years of U.S. Taiwan policy. That's actually not how I believe it. From what I know, this is how it occurred. There was a official who worked for a former Pentagon official who worked for the 2049 project, which takes money from the Taiwanese government, who ended up talking to a Trump staffer. And that staffer then put the President Tsai Ing-wen on a call list. And then after going through the call list, Trump, after talking to Bannon, and Bannon has said this afterwards to talking to Jared Kushner, they decide that they're going to call Tsai Ing-wen. The call lasts about 3 minutes. It's basically, congratulations, yeah, my win was so huge. They have the call. Afterwards, the Chinese ambassador, comes in there and berates the American ambassador. How dare you do this? This is a Chinese territory. Then Trump backs off, releasing a statement and saying to the Chinese government, Jared Kushner, with Trump in the room, we will never take a phone call from Tsai Ing-wen again. Backed off of something that I originally actually gave him somewhat credit for. He backed off of it. Something that originally I would say all the time. Like, one of the few things I think Trump is good on is Taiwan. And after further review after the fact, I'm like, actually, I was 100% wrong. I didn't do my research. And so when we talk about, like, actions speak louder than words, he said the words and then couldn't back them up with actions. Where Trump's meeting, he placed sanctions, actions, and then followed them up with words. Actions before it was even words.
Well, right, but even on the issue of Taiwan, even you concede that Taiwan still maintains its independence and that China wasn't able to do what you were fearful that they would do.
But that's a low bar,
it all comes down to this.
It?
We'll see. Let me ask you this. If there comes down to a hot conflict in the South China Sea or over Taiwan or something like that, if China saber rattles more and becomes more aggressive, like you're just saying, I think that Biden's strategy will be more effective. Yes. Well, how will we determine which is true or not?
Well, I can explain if you. The reason why I think it would be more effective is I think military strategists agree with me. Military strategists, I think, agree that the idea of America and China facing off alone, it's a lot more shady who would come out on top, obviously. Not because our Navy is like worse than China's, but because that territory is closer to them. They have even though we have fast response times due to the amount of military bases we have around the world, that territory is closer to them. They can get ships there easier. Most of their like military drills and stuff is based in that region. Well, we do this all around the world. Whereas when we have Japan on our side, when we have Taiwan on our side, when we have the Philippines on our side, when we have India, when we have Australia, New Zealand, all these people on our side, as Biden is right off the bat trying to build up to, as of course, and also the TPP was a big part of that. I know you have different disagreements but from a geostrategic perspective, the trade and relations that it would have helped push further on this area, which he was part of the Obama administration. If we're giving some of the blame, we have to give him some of the credit. And him being part of the administration that built the foundation of this strategy through freedom of navigation operations. He seems, since the Obama administration, seems to be building a concrete plan on how we would actually protect the sovereignty of these nations in the region, protect a huge area for international trade, and is also standing up for human rights. And also, I mean, for me, he's even being a little bit too aggressive, I think, with some of the language being used than I would actually want him to be. Because, I actually think personal relationships somewhat matter. I just think Trump overemphasized them.
Okay, but like I said, it doesn't matter what intel agencies or military people think about which strategy will be more effective. We'll find out. Right. Like, I could be an expert on a particular subject and say, I think this will turn out this way, but we'll know. Right, we'll know whether or not China becomes more aggressive or not. It's irrelevant if people think that's what will happen. So
you were proposing this scenario of a hot war, though, and I think in a hot war, I think
more aggressive posturing by China.
Yes, and I think both of these, it's undisputable that America facing this challenge alone. I mean, like, friends together are stronger. Like a chain is stronger, is only as strong as its weakest link. You got to have a strong chain to like work together. By having weak bonds, you're not going to be able to challenge them correctly. Like a great example would be how the Philippines Duterte has been kind of more buddy with Xi because he didn't know if he would be able to get American backing. It's really complicated, but I don't know how anybody could dispute that us with our allies would not be stronger in dealing with any of these issues than us without our allies.
Well, it's not just stronger or not. It's that is the posture. Like, it's not just about actually winning a conflict. Right, we hope it doesn't come to that.
I don't want a conflict.
Right, so the argument, if the posturing that Biden is pushing forth emboldens China to take a more aggressive posture, that's already a failure compared to the Trump administration.
Wait, but again, the thing that gets me is Trump. All these issues that you're like saying care about, for example, like the human rights stuff, which even though did you call the human rights stuff also small potatoes, or is that one of the things you care about?
No, I think that it's small potatoes when it comes to the United States and the things that are going on to the United States compared to China. But certainly, as being a human being, when it comes to like people's lives mattering, it's a huge deal.
I believe that having good relations while doing these plans is the best path forward. And considering the fact that Biden has had relationships with the Chinese government for a much, much longer period of time than Trump, I think he understands the mentality of the Chinese leadership much more better than Trump. And I think if he wanted to actually maintain a relationship while also challenging them in the region, he would be the best person to do that. Whereas Trump, right out the gate, did the Taiwan blunder, where he made the call and then immediately said, "Okay, I'll never do it again. Sorry, Xi, I won't do it again." Which I feel like that's like heightening tensions and then backing off. So that's not only heightening tensions for a supposed like strategic gain of, oh my gosh, look, we really recognize Taiwan, but then it's immediately backing it off. That's like the worst possible combination of you pissing someone off for literally zero results.
But again, like when we're talking about the Uyghur Muslims and things like that, where did this start under? Whose administration did it start under?
I would say 2013. I guess it would be the Obama administration.
Right. And this was known. In fact, Uyghur, actually, believe it or not, it might have even started under W. Bush.
There's always been some policies, but a lot of the knowledge that we now have available was not as available as it was. It was very late term Obama when a lot of this information became available, and it became a bigger issue. There was always, we knew something was going on, but we didn't know the extent of it. This is because, of course, China, when it comes to independent reports, there's going to be reports of like alleged this, alleged that, but there wasn't a consensus. There wasn't a consensus in Washington. There was not a consensus in human rights organizations. There was not a consensus in international organizations. They knew that there was abuses going on. We just had no clue of the wild extent of it. The extent of it. That's what we started to discover. And the policies of the Chinese government changed as well. The mass internment policies was not something that started like that wasn't something Obama walked into and was happening. It wasn't something that he walked in office 2008 and he was like, well, let's deal with the mass internment problem right now.
Well, actually, I mean, this is anecdotal. I'm sure if I researched this, I could find it. But I remember judging debates in the debate community in 2010 where literally there were progressive teams that were constantly talking about the Chinese internment of the Uyghur Muslims. And that was like 2009, 2010. And that was common knowledge back then. Because I remember I'd never heard the term Uyghur. And when I was first reading the evidence, I'm like, Uyghur? What is, like, I didn't know what that word was until I heard. So I think that actually you'll find the point is, again, all of these abuses you're talking about, despite the posturing and the claims about administrations like the Obama administration and the Biden administration caring about these things, there have been zero results from 8 years of an Obama administration, or so granted, it's young in the Biden administration, of doing anything. But an even better question.
I just want to be clear. There probably was some small level internment of something, but the massive internment that we see of late that made it like, oh wait, this might be a full-blown cultural genocide. That is not like a thing that was happening in 2008. The policies that like built up to that was like 2010 to like 2017, 18, and like 2016 to 2017 and 18 is when we got the vast majority of information on it. So that I mean, there was always human rights abuses going on. I mean, ever since like an authoritarian regimes in power, there's been abuses going on. It's just the proposed abuses have expanded. And that's why it's getting more attention, right? For example, well, if Rob, if you smack me, like gets some attention. But if you were like beating the shit out of me, that's gonna get more attention.
Oops, sorry. Well, yeah, that's certainly true. But again, the lead up to this was increasing the whole time, and they were committing human rights abuses that were public knowledge as far back as the early 2010. So I'm just saying that this grew. Let's talk about that. Like, let's talk again. For me, the point I'm trying to make is Biden, despite his blustering, seems to be unwilling to call China out as an adversary. The best and first step that we need to be able to deal with all of these things we're talking about as China is to correctly acknowledge that they are the premier adversary to the United States in the world. Trump was the one thing that Trump undisputedly did better than all modern presidents before him was correctly calling that out over and over. What was Biden doing? Right? Biden was saying it was xenophobic to blame Trump or to want to stop people from coming in from China over the coronavirus. Well, Biden, just real quick, when Biden talked about the major problems we have with China, can you tell me one time where his team talked about China possibly manufacturing this virus, or at the very least intentionally withholding information that caused the spread of this? Did they mention that even once?
Well, the first thing, no, because it's probably not true. The second thing, nothing off the back of my head. Well, no, I mean, and you're going to say, well, it's the WHO, but the WHO has shown this. Most experts agree that it was not created in a lab. You can probably throw like a report at me or two, but I mean, I would show that as the same thing as probably like climate change deniers. Like, I'm sure there's 2 or 3 scientists that agree with that, but I'm going to side with scientific consensus that it was not created in a lab. The vast majority of, I think, international organizations, scientific experts agree on that. So I would not expect Biden to say that.
Well, actually, U.S. intel agencies have reported that it looks likely that it did come from a China lab. I'll find the evidence if you like. Okay. And also that it brings up, and again, China has, like, you could say you don't expect Biden to say, but again, we were Muslim. Can I tell you why?
Can I tell you why though? Like, why
sure.
I don't want to. So the thing about saying you can try to. So the best parts during the Cold War for the entirety of human civilization was when we had an open line with the Russians. It's when it wasn't the Cuban Missile Crisis. It wasn't this. It wasn't that. And if this thing if it develops further into a Cold War, I would rather the President of the United States and the Chinese Premier be able to build a communicative relationship that isn't just they're the enemy, they're the enemy, they're the enemy, cut off all ties, cut off economic ties, try to do this decoupling strategy, undermine the American and international economy, start a worldwide recession, do all that stuff. I would rather that not be the case, because trade is something that stops hot conflicts from occurring, because it's an economic disincentive for conflict. Being able to have immigration between states by having your own citizens in another country, that's a disincentive for conflict. All these things, I think, by just taking it completely, they're the enemy. And on all aspects, we need to treat them like that. It's counterproductive to trying to prevent a war, and I think we can still prioritize our national security issues and human rights without just saying China's our enemy. I would rather have that diplomatic channel more open, while also calling it enemy. By the way,
wait a minute, that contradicts everything you said immediately.
Okay, tell me why.
Your entire point was Biden came out guns ablazing and was like, "Oh, the South China Sea and the Uyghurs," but now you're saying,
listen to what okay, continue.
So you want them, just real quick, you want them to be guns ablazing on everything except the one thing that was the worst thing that China is responsible for that happened in the United States. All of a sudden, when it comes to all the lives lost because of COVID, all of the freedoms lost, all of the economic stuff lost, and COVID's been a boon for China compared to the United States. That's the one issue where you think it's a good thing that Biden's correctly not calling out China on.
Okay, to be clear, I am not familiar with him calling them out on specifically holding information, but I think it's a thing. If you asked him, he would probably say, of course. Maybe he could be more active in it, and maybe I'll be nice and try to concede that. But when it comes to number one, I would say that a big problem with this specifically is, again, I disagree with you on this was developed in a lab, so that part of the blame I would not expect him to say. And the second part, that this was somewhat China's fault, I agree with you. That is something that needs to be acknowledged, but I don't think we need to cut off all trade ties and all this other stuff. For example, I think the travel ban with China ended up being pointless. I think it was a pointless thing that was done. And the reason why is that the time that was bought by that, it wasn't going to stop the spread of COVID. COVID was coming here whether we liked it or not. What it was going to do is buy us time to respond to it, probably. But we didn't end up using that time. And therefore, it ended up becoming a pointless measure. And so I'm not really going to be angry at Biden for not doing that.
The next topic's COVID, so we could talk about, like, that's fine.
Next
I was just
COVID?
going to, yeah.
I thought we were doing China and then whiteness.
I mentioned it in the group chat.
We could do whiteness too. That's cool. I don't care.
We could do whiteness. Yeah, we can.
I'm not prepared to have a conversation about COVID. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's fine. So then I'll bring up COVID here. Like all of the countries that we look at and we say, wow, they did so good against the coronavirus, countries like New Zealand and others. One of the first things they did was restrict travel from places like China where this virus is coming from. It's not, so it would have been an effective measure. Like, it just seems funny to me. Like, again, you could beat around the bush all you want. You clearly weren't against the United States and the Biden administration calling China out for issues that they thought were important. You said that was good, that showed that they will be better. But when it comes to COVID, which even if I put a link that the majority of the 17 intel agencies, a majority of them think that it came from an accidental escape from a Chinese lab. Nonetheless, we could see that over and over that China committed all sorts of lies that allowed COVID to spread, not just in the United States, but across. It was in the Whereby chat.
Where? Okay, sorry. I just thought you put it in
Sorry about that. I could put it in the Discord if
Could you do that for me?
Yeah. How does that work with our...
You just copy and paste and you put it in the little chat box.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I see it. Yeah, I didn't know we had our own chat. Yeah, there it is. So anyways, it's clear that China is largely responsible, that many people died. And Biden's record on this is, one, he called it xenophobic when we wanted to correctly stop travel from China. Even if you don't think it would have been the end-all be-all, I agree. It was an important step that could have saved lives. We have no idea how many lives it saved, but everyone admits that that would have been an important step to do. Biden did the opposite. He called it xenophobic. Then, when the first time Biden gets to talk to China, his administration gets to talk to China about the problems the U.S. has with China, they don't even bring up COVID. And you saying, well, I don't want them to because it would cause a trade war. No one's suggesting a trade war, like a complete...
Wait.
Wait.
1 second. I'm looking at this right now. Mm-hmm. Joe Biden never said that Donald Trump shouldn't have restricted travel from China.
He tweeted out the same day that Trump did that Trump had xenophobic policies.
But yeah, he does. But I mean, that's not him saying that. Just because that's what everybody says. But hey, the media is dishonest, right, Rob? So
it's certainly. So what do you think he was talking about? Trump issues a policy that says we're going to stop.
It could have been when he said, we should ban Muslims from entering the United States, and him trying to enact a Muslim ban. It could have been any number of his xenophobic policies.
Sure. So now we have to believe that Biden's. He just decided to tweet out when he's talking about COVID about Trump talking about something months ago, years ago. In fact,
I didn't say that was years ago. I gave that an example. My argument. It could have been literally any of his policies.
You know what he meant.
No, I don't know what he meant because the thing is. I'm looking at this right now. Okay. There is no time for Donald Trump's record of hysteria, xenophobia, hysterical xenophobia, and fear-mongering to lead the way instead of science. And then people afterwards asked Biden wait, is this a thing? You oppose it? And he was like, no, I never said that. I'm just saying he's not being a xenophobe.
Wait a minute, science. What was he talking about? He was clearly talking about the Muslim ban when he mentioned science.
No, I didn't say no. So. Okay, Rob, I give that as an example of a policy that I think that Trump has is xenophobic. It could have been any of the policies that Trump has implemented as xenophobic, or it could have been any of the rhetoric that Trump has enacted as xenophobic. I mean, the Kung Flu, any of that. So there's been a spike of anti-Asian hate crimes in the United States, and it might be somewhat related
the majority
to the
of which
we've seen.
Let's check the Bureau. We'll get to this on Whiteness. Let's check the Bureau of Justice statistics and see where those hate crimes are coming from, shall we? It doesn't look like traditional Trump voters, does it? Anyways,
what does that mean? Wait, you don't think the president... Wait. I don't care if it's black people doing it. I don't care if it's Mexican people doing it. I don't care if it's white people doing it. Rhetoric, even if you don't like a guy, can still affect you. For example, even if I don't like you, Rob, but I hear from you and you're from a position of power where everybody listens and you're saying Kung Flu, China virus, all this different stuff, it can still have an effect on people.
Okay, so if you'll allow me to explain for a second. So Dylan's actually making the exact point why Biden's going to be so bad on China, because you can't even correctly call them out as the virus originating there. Their lies causing the virus.
When did I say that? What? Okay, I can. You want me to call them out?
Again.
I can do it right
now.
Hold
on, guys. Hold on, real quick. Rob, go ahead. Finish your thought, and then we'll go to Dylan.
Okay, so real quick, when we look at this, we can see when Biden mentioned science, it's clear he's talking about COVID, and the policy that Trump issued that day was saying that we should stop travel from China. He later, once the consensus was that stopping travel from China was a good thing, he said, "Oh wait, I didn't really mean that." But then when he had a chance to call China out, as he later should have, the argument of Biden and the Democrats that are running him was, no, to do so would be xenophobic. We can't call it out, and we're responsible for all these abuses and people having this rhetoric. So, in other words, we can't call China out for being bad, or else hate crimes could rise in the United States. So, I guess then, if there are increased, let me ask you this: if there are increased hate crimes against Chinese,
hold on, Rob. Okay. Let's go to Dylan. Yeah, because you made a point. Let's and also, Dylan, you said you didn't say something. I just want to make sure your stance isn't getting misrepresented.
I have done on my own stream deep dives on how the Chinese government tried to cover up early data, did not release the data. It's full reports on this. This is widely known. This is something I've called out. I believe there should have been more independent reporting, and that could definitely had an effect, right? I have also called out my own government when I thought it had failures and when it had successes, right? For example, I think Operation Warp Speed seems to have been successful. I think a lot of his early statements about maybe it'll go away with the summer, just stuff that didn't seem to be really based on what I think which things I don't think he should have been saying publicly, I think is also a failure. I think when it comes to the failure, the amount of people that COVID has killed in the United States, a lot of people are to blame, including the Chinese government, through the amount of time they would have bought us by possibly telling that. Now, like the travel ban from China, I don't think at the end of the day, with Trump in office, it would have had an effect if we actually had that information, because again, I don't think buying time would have done Trump any good, because he only seemed to change his policies on COVID once the bodies really started hitting the floor. So I don't think he would have used that time wisely. So it's not that I don't want to call him out.
Why didn't it? Just a simple question.
I didn't even get to respond to your second thing, though. You said like two things. Okay. So this isn't even a tweet that Biden put out. He was on the campaign trail in Iowa, and while in Iowa campaigning for the Democratic primary, he said a statement in a speech, in a longer speech. So it wasn't like this
even
isolated out. What?
It's even like a tweet is a flippant momentary thing that you said. A speech is something you had planned out.
Yes, you planned out, which could have been planned the day before, could have been planned in, but if you're doing it a long speech, and he says one thing that like about, and this is a thing where, you know, the Democrats are always calling Trump a racist. The Democrats are always calling Trump a xenophobe. The idea that, why didn't he just call it out directly? Like, he should, you know how he could have done it if he wanted to be like an Antifa super soldier? He could be like, Trump is trying to ban the Chinese from entering America. He didn't do that. He just said, and I'll read it out, this is no time for Donald Trump's record of history of xenophobia, hysterical xenophobia, and fear-mongering to lead the way instead of science. So,
right.
I don't.
So,
I think that could have been either one of two things. It could have been what you're proposing, or it could have been him talking about Trump's history of saying things like Kung Flu, the China virus, the Chinese virus, things that I would say did have an impact on the amount of Asian hate crimes in the United States.
Show me any.
All right, guys, just really quickly. So, Rob, go ahead and give a rebuttal. Then we'll go to Dylan, and Dylan, that'll be the ending, and then we'll go to questions from the audience.
Okay. Can I read my chat as well for questions? Would that be like?
Yeah, I have questions from your chat. Actually, most of them are from your chat. So, I mean, if you have one particular, but I have about like four.
Okay,
if you
wanted to make sure you read my chat too. I wanted to.
Okay, so we have 2 minute close for me, and then for Dylan, then questions. What we got? Okay. All right. So it's clear that Biden, again, we didn't even get into the story about like Biden having connections to the CCP. His record under China was abysmal in the 8 years he was with Obama. There's no evidence that he'll do better. Trump was good because he correctly pointed out that China was our biggest geopolitical threat. Biden has balked at that. He continues to talk about Russia. I had evidence I was unable to get to. The same intel agent people that Biden is trusting when it comes to dealing with foreign powers. I have a quote here. This is from the Inspector General of the IC said, quote, China analysts were hesitant to assess Chinese actions as undue influence or interference. These analysts appeared reluctant to have their analysis on China brought forward because they tend to disagree with the administration, that's Trump's policies, saying in effect, I don't want our intelligence used to support those policies. This behavior would constitute a violation of Analytics Standard B. So the argument, so we clearly see that the intelligence agency, even while Trump was there, that Biden is so in love with and is so pushing forward, intentionally withheld evidence that China interfered in our election. We saw the assessment that they just put out under Biden saying they didn't interfere. So it proves that when it comes to the big issues that affect the United States, like COVID, like interfering in our election, that the Biden administration is going to let them get away with it and bury it. Dylan cannot, he's contradictory. He says, oh, I like Biden being aggressive when it comes to some of these issues, but the biggest issues, things like intellectual property theft, spying in the United States, control of our academia, etc., and COVID, which is the biggest issue, he can't explain why Biden never once criticized, even when given the chance, anything about this. He never once endorsed the travel ban. Yes. Okay, you don't think that Blinken had the chance to bring that up? And Biden had the chance the entire campaign and chose not to say anything. Instead, he talked about China not being an adversary, just being a rival and things like that.
All right. Dylan, 2 minutes. Outro. Go ahead.
Biden is setting up to probably be the most tough on China presidency to ever exist in the history of this country. I think from the first meeting and the rhetoric that was done, it was actually somewhat set me off. And it was actually, to me, it was even too much. I think we could look at, but if we look at Trump's record on China in comparison to what Biden's doing, immediately calling out the Uyghurs, immediately calling out what's going on in Hong Kong, immediately calling out Taiwanese independence, actually inviting what is essentially the Taiwanese ambassador to the inauguration when Trump was too scared of hurting relationships with Xi to actually send high-ranking American officials to Taiwan and constantly stopping people. And when we did send one and he didn't know about it, he got angry and said, who the fuck is Alex Wong? And was close to firing the guy just for going there. And I mean, we could talk about how he said, according, and of course, I know Rob would disagree with me on here, but I've actually read John Bolton's book on the issue, and it seems to be a pretty accurate portrayal of Trump's foreign policy. And he said, and behind closed doors, which lines up with what he was doing at the time when he was saying publicly while this was going on, I'm not going to bring up the Xinjiang issue because I'm trying to deal with the whole trade thing right now. He said that the camps for a million of Uyghur Muslims was exactly the right thing to do. And you know what? I don't think the guy who has a history of calling for the bombing of civilians in the Middle East, calling for war crimes on Iran, and called for a Muslim ban, banning Muslims from entering the United States, is exactly someone who initially was going to care about the Uyghurs' fate in Xinjiang, China, when, you know, he was too busy trying to build that personal relationship that is important to him. Personal relationship that ended up being detrimental to the United States and our strategy in the region. There you go.
All right, good talk, guys. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and go to questions from the audience. And again, these questions, some of them are directed towards a specific panelist. If the other panelist wants to jump in and give their thoughts, they're free to do so as well. This first question is from Electric Ocean. He asks, or they ask, how should we build independent supply chains from China? Whoever wants to take that can take it.
So I can go first if you want. Actually, here's the thing, right? I think that it came across clear. I don't think Trump was perfect on China. I think there was a lot to be desired. One of the things that Biden administration is suggesting doing is pushing this infrastructure bill that actually has bipartisan support with the Republicans. Now, I have a problem with deficit spending and things like that, but infrastructure is one way to spend. So I'm sure Dylan probably has researched this and will agree with me that Biden is suggesting right now, and I think it would be a good thing, that we increased infrastructure. I don't think that this is necessarily the best way to counter China, right? And if we're talking about economic independence, then I think once we get to Green New Deal type stuff, that'll be a boon for China as they will seek out cheap energy that they'll be able to. But when it comes to actual infrastructure bills, I think Dylan will agree. Biden's suggesting pushing one now.
Yeah, I mean, I'm of course very in favor of a large scale infrastructure bill. I'm actually more fine with deficit spending, but that's a totally different discussion.
Right.
I do actually think, even though I want to keep trade with China open, I'm somebody who's quite a globalist. If I'm being 100% honest with the audience, building due to the strategic importance of certain goods, it's important to maybe not necessarily have them within the United States, but at least with supply chains that we know 100% are going to be safe. Like we pretty much know that at no point in the near future, France is going to turn on the United States and start a decoupling strategy. As long as we have them in general blocks where we think they can be strategically located for certain goods and services that are of importance for international, for the United States, that's fine. A great example of what we do is we subsidize a lot of farms, because we believe that food subsidization is important, not only because of the lobbying of these organizations, but we do believe they are of a national security importance to actually have like a domestic food production, be able to do that domestically. So it's not necessarily anything I'm opposed to. How we do the specifics of it, I am not an economist, but I just wanted to say geopolitically, not the worst thing to do. But I just want to make sure that people don't equate that with a decoupling strategy, because the decoupling strategy, I think, is one of the many dominoes that could lead to actually like hot conflicts.
Gotcha. Okay. So this next question is from Curly Quotes. They say, a question for the panelists. What should U.S. policy aim to do regarding China? Should we try to make them less economically powerful? Should we try to change their domestic human rights policy? Should we try to make them less powerful diplomatically? Which is the most important? And whoever wants to take that can take that.
Go first.
You can go first, Dylan.
Well, I want to write the questions down first. So
okay. Yeah, sure. So that's no problem. I'll take it first. So I think the most effective strategy first is to correctly call out that China is our adversary and the dangers that arise if China occurs. That also means calling out when they do things that directly influence the United States in a negative way, such as their interference in the 2020 election, that our intel agencies admitted after being investigated by an inspector general that they had intentionally lied about that. And we see the Biden administration pushing those lies now, saying, oh, China didn't interfere. They did so because they didn't want to help Trump, because Trump was correct that China is our biggest adversary and they were interfering. It doesn't even make sense that China wouldn't have interfered. It also means calling out abuses that they're doing, and it means making the United States as economically independent from China as possible. If China wants to come back to the table and stop their deceptive trade practices and stop their human rights abuses, so be it. If not, the best way to deal with them isn't necessarily a military conflict, though we should be ready and willing to have a military that is capable of defending the United States interest. But the best way to do it is to build up the United States economically and as a trade partner to the rest of the world that will force China to then have to compete with us by alleviating a lot of the problems that we see in China.
So I just do want to make the fact that the Biden administration released the report that also included the information on China, which the main indication of the report was that China, while did have some involvement, was not nearly as widespread as other nations, other major competitors. And I just wanted to make sure that and this is a genuine question, Rob. Do you agree that Russia interfered in the 2020 election just like they did in the 2016 one?
I would say they did, like almost every foreign country did.
Do you wait to the same scale?
I couldn't tell you exactly what the scale is. I know the scale was ineffectual.
Well, you read the report apparently, so you should know
did.
The scale was much bigger when it comes to Russia.
What
than
did they
any
say?
other.
Let's try not to derail too much, okay, guys? So let's just like 1 minute.
They didn't even say where they got the information.
I gotta let off because it's not on topic. I just wanted to bring that up. So the main things for me is going to be humanitarian rights because I am somebody who got into this because I do not believe a border dictates somebody's moral consideration. So that would, of course, be the Uyghur issue. That would be Hong Kong and issues of that sort. Now, I think Hong Kong, sadly, at this point, I think our main chance was the last 4 years, and I think that his chance is mostly faded. So I don't know how much Biden can do that. I think we dropped the ball on getting anything done there. I don't think we coordinated with the international community enough, and that's would be another one of my criticisms of Trump was that while he did issue certain sanctions, stop the sending of police equipment, you need to coordinate with your allies to do a coordinated response if you were going to do anything. But I do think when it comes to Uyghurs, that would be a big issue for me. When it comes to civil rights, free speech, stuff like that in the region, it'd be a big thing to me. Here's a big thing for me nobody's talking about. Right now, there's a military coup that has occurred in Myanmar. And that government, its main supplier of military weapons is the Chinese government. Those weapons are currently being used to kill protesters in Myanmar, and that same guns were also used to literally commit a genocide against Muslims, against Rohingya Muslims, where 740,000 were expelled from the country. And then China doesn't speak up at all when any of that's happening, and in fact defends Myanmar when it comes to the genocide, and doesn't speak up when the protesters start getting shot. And they had meetings with the military officials before the coup. They had a relationship with the military government, the military, and the civilian government. They don't speak up until protesters bash in the windows and burn down a Chinese company. Then they say, how dare they? But not when they're getting shot. That is an issue I care about a lot. And thankfully, it seems Biden is starting. We had Magnitsky sanctions.
If I may, you've talked a lot. Go ahead, I'll leave you finish.
I just wanted to
respond
say,
to this
I
real
like
quick.
The specific sanctions he's placed on officials and on military companies, which avoid civilians and directly targets the actual economic backing that the military uses to pay for these guns. That's something I really like. But I didn't get to talk about Taiwan or trade, but Robert's response, so I'll let him.
Okay,
just a heads up though, because we got to get to the next. We still have 2 more questions, and we got to get to the next topic. So Rob, keep it short, and we'll go to the next question.
15-second, right?
Yep.
I just want to say that it's funny that Dylan wants them to be aggressive on every issue except COVID. On that, he said, "Oh, we can't risk posturing and being aggressive." So you can see how schizophrenic this policy is.
Can I ask you, what does getting hard on COVID even mean?
Calling them out, one. It
Then
seems
what?
to be that you suggest. Okay, calling them out and threatening to do the sort of things that we're doing.
Okay, so
when it comes
calling
to
them
trade
out,
policies, the
threatening
international
sounds like a lot of words. What's the actual action we can take?
We build an international coalition to discuss how bad China.
So discuss more talking,
guys. I'm stopping this right here because it's gonna get into another conversation. So let's just move on. Okay, so let's just go to the next question. This one is also from Ocean Electric. It says for Rob, but Dylan, you're more than welcome to give your 2 cents if you want. They ask, should we decouple from China?
Yes, as much as possible. Now, that doesn't mean a permanent solution. But for example, when you could listen to Dylan talk about all the horrible abuses that occur in China and this, that, and the other. Like, what we need to do is stop rewarding them by allowing them to have undue influence in the United States in our academic settings, in their spying that goes unpunished, in their intellectual property theft, in their lying that occurred with COVID. We should stop dealing with them until they make steps to correct the abuses and acknowledge the abuses he had. Instead, they push their position in the World Health Organization to push more Chinese propaganda about what was going on with the COVID virus. And the World Health Organization, by the way, one of the labs in Wuhan was a World Health Organization lab. They push that, and Biden's unwilling to call them out for those sort of things. So yes, we should decouple until they curb the behavior that we're talking about here and take responsibility for the terrible things that they've done.
I do want to make clear that when it comes to Biden and the World Health Organization and all these things, he's rejoined it because he wants to assert American influence in these organizations that are not going to go away. We can pretend that we're going to make a Trump-based World Health patriotic organization. It's not going to happen. Nobody's going to leave the WHO to join that. We might get I don't know, Guatemala or something. I think it's Honduras or El Salvador, whichever one has the really center right president. Well, I would say call him far right personally. Just stands for homosexuals. But that's just not going to happen. I think rejoining these international organizations, trying to assert ourselves like Biden has tried to do, for example, donations to the COVAX program is something we could do. But decoupling is not an effective strategy. Decoupling is saying, I'm going to punish you by shooting you. Then we're both dead. Nothing was accomplished there. The trade that we lose from China as a consumer-based economy will be disastrous for the American economy. We already saw how the steel tariffs affected the majority of people who were affected by the steel tariffs in the United States were hurt. If we want to actually affect them, we need to do it through international coalition building, not by just decoupling and increasing the chances of war.
All right. So next question from Puck Flicker. This is directed towards Dylan, but Rob, you're more than welcome to give your 2 cents as well. Dylan, does China feel the United States is a foe or a friend?
I think they see us as a strategic competitor, which I think is the same thing that way we view them and the same way that Biden views them. They are building up things in the South China Sea for obvious reasons to challenge our influence in the region. They are getting diplomatically big on the world stage. They're investing in organizations. They're donating vaccines. They're doing this all to gain favor on the world stage, to offer their model in comparison to the American model. And that is why one of the main reasons why I want us to get more involved in the world stage, more involved in the World Health Organization, because I don't think we can do this party of one coalition building. This isn't going to work. We are as a party of one on the world stage. We can't just leave all these organizations and get disengaged. It's not going to work. Now we can talk about well, what if we propose a different organization to counter it, or this organization to counter this, or this organization to counter this? We saw proposals for it, but none of them were affected. Nobody wanted to join them, and nothing occurred there. What we would have ended up doing is getting some of the most devoted allies, which are extremely economically dependent on it. We would have gotten Haiti, and we would have gotten El Salvador to join this organization, and that would have been it. And so when I think that we need to view them as strategic and economic competitors, and I think economic competition can be a beautiful, beautiful thing if we go by common rules and common regulations. So basically, investment in Africa would be a great example. If we both shovel money into Africa, give everybody good deals, then everybody benefits.
Just real quick, China does not view us as a competitor. They view us as an enemy. They view us as the hegemon, and they seek to usurp us. All of their actions suggest stuff. You can see that China has basically been eating the United States lunch through espionage, through intellectual property theft, through involving itself in our culture, academia, and things like that for years. It's been doing so for decades, and it's rapidly catching up to the United States and will surpass the United States unless we treat China as a competitor. But you're right that Joe Biden does not see China as an adversary. He sees them merely as a competitor. And that's one of the huge problems. Until we treat China as the adversary that they are, they will continue to diplomatically crush us, espionagely crush us, and it's going to be a disaster for the United States by the time we wake up and try to do something about
it. Dylan, you can respond if you want. If you wanted.
Yeah, we do all these things too, I guess. There's a few things that they don't do that we also do. I think the intellectual property theft would be an example. But Yeah, I mean, like a lot of these things we also do. While it's hard to believe, we also have spies like throughout China, like everywhere. We also have.
But I mean,
and
just
the
real
thing
quick,
is, when I say strategic competitor, I just want to be clear. I'm not saying like they don't see that as adversarial in any way. When I say that, it's like we're competing against each other in strategic positioning in the region. But I think that certain language I would not like to use because I do think it's beneficial to have a relationship, and I'd rather not just fall into another Cold War.
All right, and Dylan, I know you were. Did you get any questions you wanted to read out from your chat, or you want to move on?
I'll ask them quick, like chat. If you want, you got like a minute to give me a good question before we have to move on.
Yeah, I got a couple from them. There were actually most of them were from them. But yeah.
Again, the point is, you might say, well, yeah, China does view us as an adversary. Joe Biden was very specific. That's not how he views China. Well, very specific.
You said actions speak louder than words, and it seems that China, but Joe Biden's actions seems to be a lot stronger.
The problem, and again, let me just say this. This is something we will know. If China gets more aggressive, if it ends up in more of a hot conflict, if it ends up with trade wars escalating and things like that, then we'll know that Biden's policies were incorrect.
I got a question for you, actually, from chat.
Okay.
If we decouple from China, how do we stop that from spiraling out into hot conflict?
Well, because we're in an era now where hot conflicts will be very rare. It actually is more likely to be proxy conflicts more than anything else. So decoupling from China would force then the United States and China to seek other global partners. That's what China would do. China is not just going to start bombing us, right? China would immediately try to reach out and try to get allies around the world. Most of those allies that they would need, most of the products that they sell are to Western countries that would be allies of the United States. Now, it doesn't need to be a complete decoupling, right? That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is, before we engage in some sort of hot conflict or something like that, which could theoretically happen, we should say we're going to decouple in the form of tariffs and of things like that, because we're not going to reward this behavior. And you could say, well, tariffs hurt steel workers and things like that. The reality is the wealth of the country of the United States and the workers of it has been shipped overseas for the past 50 years through these free trade policies that actually enrich countries like China and enrich politicians in the United States that get rich off China, such as Joe Biden and his son.
Okay, so first thing I'd like to say is I would also like to avoid proxy conflicts. If we look at Vietnam, if we look at the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, Tenki's molding in chat because I used the word invasion. I don't care. Look, all I'm saying when it comes to the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, I think children playing with landmines until their arms blowing off, and you've reduced the population of the nation by 10 to 20%, doesn't seem like a friendly fucking stroll when our troops go into the country and decades later, we still find mass graves. Anyway, proxy conflicts, obviously still bad, and I'd like to avoid those if possible. And second is, I think you brought up a great point. International conflicts decreasing. But that doesn't happen because human nature has changed and we've all found enlightenment. I would think the reason why is due to international trade and international organizations. If back in the day, if I wanted cocoa beans, I had to roll up into your area and be like, hey, cocoa beans. Bag, we're in charge now. Now it's like, oh, it's actually a lot easier to just trade with you. A lot easier to have those cocoa beans come to me directly. And so I see trade as one of the main pillars against open conflict coming out in a lot of these areas. And China would be a great example. A lot of these nations would be a great example. If you don't need to like go up into somebody's house and kill them for their resources, and you can trade for it a lot easier with ease of trade, why not do that?
Okay, can I ask
really quickly? Let's just do one cycle, Rob, and then back to Dylan, and then we'll move on because we got to get to the next topic.
Okay. So if I could just ask real quick, Dylan, do you think that in the past 50 years that the trade policies that we've had in China have harmed the U.S. worker and greatly enriched China?
Harmed and benefited.
Okay, how would you deal with the abuses you're talking about with China if you're opposed to tariffs and you're opposed to conflicts? We're just going to talk? That's what we're going to do? You don't want tariffs. You don't want conflict.
I would like diplomacy first.
Dylan, last word, by the way, and we're going to move on.
Diplomacy first, consequences second. There you go.
No tariffs, though.
Wait. What do you think the word consequences mean? I'm trying to listen to the rules here. I'm trying to respect, as a panel host, the rules of no more words.
No more.
And Rob is being a heel in wrestling. He's doing low blows when the referee's not looking.
Yeah. All right. So let's move on. So great talk, guys. By the way, really great stuff. So second topic, Whiteness. whiteness has been a topic gaining ground in today's politics, right? Rejecting whiteness and the idea of white privilege. They go hand in hand. So, panelists, what does whiteness mean to you, or what does whiteness mean in general? And what are your thoughts on it? Whoever can go.
As a race trader, you should go first.
Yeah.
Okay, I go first.
Yeah,
is that what you're saying? Okay. Whiteness is basically used to mean to go after anything that the progressive left or the critical race theorist want. That's how it's used. For example, we could see after the Islamic shooter the other day, that was also called whiteness. He was white. Syrians are white, says Tariq Naheed. That is what he said. So it's just used as an excuse to be racist. That's what it is. People try to say, no, it meant something historically in the past, but we could see how if someone's considered white, it determines on whether or not they are in line as a potential ally or enemy with what these critical race theories say. This is nothing but an unabashed excuse for racism. It's used to keep us separated by race so that people in charge of this country continue to exploit and drive, like, for example, these things like the stimulus under COVID and the lockdowns have led to an even greater wealth inequality and a transfer of wealth from the poor and working class. These people haven't represented average Americans for the past 50 years, and they know if they could divide us on things like race, it's a boon to them. They don't really care about these issues like race. It's just a tool that they use to go after. Whiteness is amorphic. It will try to get Dylan to nail down a definition that he wants to go with it. But the truth is, this definition is constantly changing, just like terms like toxic masculinity, patriarchy, etc. All of them are used to be able to be bigoted and to attack people based on immutable characteristics. It's something that we need to avoid. And it's something that conceals the truth and tries to rile up emotional appeals in people to cause division. And it's not based on reality. And many times the data will show that they use it.
All right, Dylan, 2 minutes. Go ahead.
Okay, I would go with the definition from the African American History Museum. So I'm going to go local, Metro DC. I got to support my local businesses, right? Whiteness and white racialized identity refer to the way that white people, their customs, cultures, and belief operate as the standard by which all other groups are compared. And so that would be the definition I guess I could work with. But I wanted to talk primarily about systematic racism and the privileges that white people have with white privilege in this country, right? When we talk about the privileges, and I know we've had discussion before, and Rob, you said something along the lines of, you know what, white people got white privilege, I agree, but black people also got black privilege. And the main counterance I would have to something like this is, you know what, black people have, I guess, certain privileges to, say certain words or do a certain few things, but the vast majority of benefits are laid on the white side. As whether it comes to the generational wealth that white people have been able to produce in comparison to black people, whether it comes to the level of gun violence in communities in comparison to white people, whether it be how systems, for example, the death penalty is you're 3.5 times more likely to get the death penalty if you're black and more likely to go to prison if the victim is white, showing that not only is the judicial system when it comes to normal sentencing you racist on the basis of you being black, but it also depends on who the victim is, how harsh the crime is going to be punished. And that's from that I can give you studies from the UCLA, I can give you University of Maryland, University of North Carolina for any of these. This is because I just had a debate on modern day debates about the death penalty. Whiteness has basically made it for marijuana convictions to be heavily applied to black people over white people. If you look at the beauty industry, and anybody who provides beauty products, you can look at the vast majority of products being sphered toward whiteness and a lot of products being marketing towards people to lighten their skin, showing that whiteness is not only the standard for systems of oppression, but the standard in our culture, and that everybody has to work around whiteness to be even considered beautiful and sometimes human.
Okay. All right. It's open to open discussion. Go ahead, whoever wants.
The definition you read, where was it from?
The African American History Museum. It's the one in DC. I wanted to use a local source. Yeah. Right.
I put the link in Discord. Can you just check that that's the same place?
Let me check. The Altar of Deceit.
It links to an actual image of the National Museum of African American History Coalition. The NMAHC.
I don't know, because this is from 1990, and the National Museum of African American History and Culture didn't exist until like 2015.
No, it's not. Wait.
I remember because I was one of the first tour groups to go.
Right. So
this,
okay.
I wasn't alive during this thing. So.
Okay. Well, so it says White dominant culture or whiteness refers to the ways white people and their traditions, attitudes, and ways of life have been normalized over time and are now considered standard practices in the United States. And since white people still hold the most institutional power in America, we have internalized some aspects of white culture, including people of color. Is that similar to the definition you read?
It's a little bit more detailed, but I guess. Yeah.
Okay. We can see. So this was put out, even if it was something that was created a long time ago, it was spread by the National Museum of African American History Coalition. And that was spread in the past
Coalition,
few years.
Which is different than specifically what I'm.
Okay, fair enough. But this is clearly, let me see.
It's just this is 1990, and my thing is like 2015, which is why it's confusing me.
Let's see what they're called. The NMAAHC. No, I don't want to shop. Thank you. The National Museum of African American History and Culture.
That's it. Yep. Okay. Sorry. That was 1990, so I was confused. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So so that's the definition we're going. Here's some of the characteristics of whiteness that they talk about that we need to avoid. The individual is the primary unit, self-reliance, independence and autonomy, the nuclear family, the husband's the breadwinner, children should have their own rooms, objective, rational, linear thinking, cause and effect relationships, Protestant work ethic. Hard work is key to success. Work before you play. Religion, Christianity, status and power. Wealth equals work. Your job's who you are. Respect of authority. Future orientation, planning for the future. Progress is best. Delayed gratification. Tomorrow will be better. Time, follow rigid time schedules. Time viewed as commodity. Aesthetics, based on European cultures. Steak and potatoes, bland is best. Woman is based on blonde, thin. Man's attractiveness based on economics. Justice based on English common law. Protect property entitlements. Competition, be number one.
All right,
winner,
so
loser,
Rob,
the point is,
yeah.
Right, the reason that I'm bringing them up, this is the problem with saying reject whiteness. The very organization that you cite as the definition for whiteness says that all of this stuff, things like working hard, preparing for the future, being on time, being respectful, caring about the nuclear family. These are all examples of whiteness. This shows that it's bigoted, not just to white people, but to people of color as well.
How is that
and it
bad?
Shows how is what bad? Rejecting
wait.
such as...
So you're telling me that at the National American History Museum, which they picked this up possibly after it was born in like 2014, and throwing this around and saying your culture is being on time, your whiteness is being number one and winning at all costs. Like, how are these things that would, like, this is things that I'd be like, yo, dope. What's the... Okay,
sure. Let's go through some of this. Nuclear family, we should reject.
In some aspects, I think being viewed as the only option is something that we should reject.
Independence and autonomy should not be highly valued.
Independence and autonomy? No, I don't believe in that. No.
So real quick, just so I think maybe I can like step in, like maybe fast track this. So I'm from what Rob is saying, I think is what he's saying is he's not saying that those things are bad. He's saying that rejecting those things are bad. Am I understanding you correctly, Rob?
Well,
and I'm also not saying they're bad.
Now let's go. We're running off of an infographic here, so it's not like a dictionary definition. We're running off of like a thing somebody made in a room. But by the way, let me be clear that I've seen a million bad graphics describing definitions. I have seen graphics for racism range from like when you hate people of another race to like the most widest like thing. Like, for what I'm trying to get at here is, yes, a lot of people have different definitions for things, and this is one infographic, but I could reject certain, if what we're working on is on this definition, which I don't even necessarily agree with, but let's say for argumentation's sake, I would say certain aspects of whiteness, and seeing that as the basic kind of neutral thing, as the thing that's just kind of pushed on culture generally, are bad. And some of it is good. For example, beauty standards, I would say, is bad. The idea that there's a lot of black women in this country who feel like they're not beautiful because they're not skinny and white and blonde is a bad aspect of whiteness. But if another aspect of whiteness is individualism, then I have no problem with that.
Right, and so this further goes to prove the point in my opening speech. Whiteness is picks and chooses whatever the hell they want, and they want to reject certain things. And locally say we need to reject whiteness. You had a chance to talk. So two things to say on this point directly. One, it proves what I said, that multiple people, we should reject the idea of saying things like reject whiteness because different people mean different things when they say it. And so a lot of people are straight up advocating racism, or they're advocating the things that are in this definition and explanation that we see from the very place that you cited as the definition definition of what whiteness is. And second, it's irrelevant if you think this infographic is good or not when you're agreeing with the positions that we're talking about. That's why I'm asking you.
Can I ask you?
So you might say, I don't respect this infographic, but I say, do you respect this point? And you say, yeah, I respect it. Then it doesn't matter. If
you were running through a list, and I was answering like, that's okay, that's bad, exactly. That's okay, that's bad. If you want to do that, we can do that. But let me ask you a question: is terrorism bad, Rob?
Yes.
Terrorism's bad.
Yes.
You have a problem with the Boston? When we dumped tea in the river, when we broke up all that, we used our terror to on that property and force terror against the state of the British to do that and throw that into that. That's a definition some people use for terrorism.
Yeah, but that's not what that was. That was a conflict that started with the United States, the peoples here declaring war on a power that was occupying them.
Would Antifa being like bashing in a window, and doing stuff like that, would that be terrorism?
Yes.
But us destroying British tea would not be terrorism because it's the British and that's occupation and that's different. That would to you be a freedom fighter.
Sure.
Do you see how these definitions are fluid for a lot of people for complicated words? Whiteness, like terrorism, are complicated words that a lot of people have a lot of different definitions for.
I see. Right. I see that there's a conflation that I constantly see with people on the left that want to make excuses like you did with marching with Black Lives Matter and other organizations that 223 locations had violence and riots that occurred throughout the country. And you want to say, well, it's okay because the bus. Yeah, 94 peaceful, and we still had 223 locations of violence. Meanwhile, we had one that came from the right.
Wonderful, actually. It's the fact that it was great that it was that low. Is my answer because you know what? Hey, let me give you a great example. The civil rights movement. Wait, Rob. Let me ask you a question. Is the civil rights movement a failure? Should we piss on the civil rights movement? That's a question because there were.
What does that have to?
There was riots during the civil rights. There was violence during the civil rights movement. People rioted during the civil rights movement. Do we reject the civil rights movement in its entirety because of violent instances? That'd be ridiculous.
So here we go. So here's what we see, and you can see that this is the default. What many people like Dylan and others on the left will do. They'll constantly make excuses for violence because they say we think the motivation for the violence was okay, and they'll liken it to other things that it has nothing to do with, and then say therefore that somehow justifies. Now I answered your question. Now let me ask you this question: if we say thank God that it was only 6% that was violent, okay, what percentage of Trump rallies resulted in riots?
I would not know. I mean, I guess
I would say less than 1%. There were thousands upon thousands of Trump riots. Let's go with the examples you can give of Trump rallies having riots. Go ahead.
Okay, it would be the Capitol, I would assume.
Okay, next.
One. Okay.
So hey, why the focus on the Capitol? Now wait a minute. You talked about previously the need to have standout orders and things like that because the Capitol was so bad, but it was less than 1%. Now you understand.
All right, Rob, real quick. Dylan, you got a good bunch of stuff. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna push it on
Black
to Dylan.
Lives Matter, civil rights, riots at Trump. One second, I'm trying to write all this down because it's just.
Did I bring up civil rights? Was that what
I brought up civil rights, but you said that Black Lives Matter have nothing to do with civil rights, which is why I wanted to bring that up. Black Lives Matter
not the civil rights movement.
It
not
does
the
have,
civil
yes,
rights
it does.
movement.
Hold on, guys. Whoa, hold on. Dylan, you have a list of stuff you want to respond to. Go ahead.
Yes, many of the issues that MLK brought up during then, including police brutality, was a big issue during the civil rights movement. In fact, I would say dogs being sent on protesters, violence towards protesters, was a big part of the civil rights movement. Being mistreated by police was a big part of the civil rights movement. In fact, Black Lives Matter is trying to continue that part of the civil rights movement, which he saw as not unfulfilled. To say it has no affiliation, no association whatsoever, I would say that's ridiculous. It's in a lot of ways it's a direct continuation. And when it comes to riots, yeah, but the thing is to equivocate that a political riot, a political candidate to an organization of an issue that has been unattended to for centuries since slavery, well, it would be ridiculous. It would be like for me saying how many rallies has she had where a riot took place? She in China. Or how many rallies did, Justin Trudeau have where violence did not occur? And then comparing it to an unattended social issue where people protested about that issue, tons of riots occurred. If you look at Lebanon and the amount of violence on the streets where they broke in windows and stuff because of the economy, that is the natural result of unattended issues. If you look at Hong Kong, the natural result of an unattended issue. This is going to happen in every society across the world. And so, personally, I think one of the widest protest movements in the history of the United States having such a low rate of violence, and this is where you clip here's all the examples of footage I give, not next to statistics of course, but all the examples of violence and footage I've seen that's really made me angry, is actually a good thing that it has been so low. And this is a natural result of an unintended social issue. I think we should solve it by, dealing with police brutality, generational inequality.
And again, now we see a problem. Now we can further see the problem with this idea of projecting whiteness and how it's this amorphous thing, even as Dylan's admitted, well, not people use it differently. You can see exactly what the problem is. Now we're making excuses for violence, saying, oh, it's just like MLK marching. It's just like the civil rights movement of that era. It's not. It's nothing like that, right? Okay. It's not even close to that. And the fact that we're making excuses for that and the idea of rejecting whiteness and all the terrible things that come, just because there are disproportional things that happen, we have to look at the data as to why those disproportional things can happen. So, for example, if we could point to a different group that's even more adversely affected by law enforcement than Black Americans, do you think that it would be okay if we saw 223 riots from that group?
I would be bad to see riots from any group.
Oh, but if it was only 6% or less, it would, well, it's a continuation of important social issues, right? So this is the problem,
Depends on the social issue, of course.
So why is it that these riots? How is it an extension of the civil rights movement? Just because we can see things like incarceration.
Let me be clear. I think you have a very fairy tale version of what the civil rights movement was. That it was this nice, polite Black man saying racism bad and marching with a lot of other people, and then the racist people opposed them and was violent, and then it was over. There were Black people with fucking guns in the Black Panther Party. That's the civil rights movement. There was riots. That was part of the civil rights movement. Okay. There's a lot of stuff that's part of the civil rights movement. And you want to look at today? There's peaceful people leading their community in protest. That's the Black Lives Matter movement. There is people, of course, rioting, and because of the injustice they've seen, you could see as part of the movement, not the ILC, of course.
Give me this data that shows the injustice.
Data that shows the injustice? Okay, a great example. Here's a great example. Why is it that a Black person is 3.5 times more likely to be put on death row than a white person?
Maybe because because there's more violent crime that occurs in the Black community, and it's not factoring in for things like maybe they don't have enough, disproportionately the crimes they commit are more heinous in those communities, so the community demands more sort of justice from the prosecutors there like that.
Okay, why? Okay. Maybe you would have an argument there if the victim was white, they also have a higher sentencing rate. As in that, if the victim of a crime is white, you're more likely to get a more impactful justicing rate in comparison to if they were a Black person.
Well, again,
Black people, and I know you'd bring this up, Black on Black crime is a more impactful thing than Black on white or white on Black crime, because that's the most that happens when you talk about the specific community. So why is it that when a Black person kills another Black person, they get a lower sentence than if a Black person kills a white person?
Well, maybe because there's more of a call for potential hate crimes, that when there's an interracial killing that you're more likely to get a more significant sentence. And maybe because Black people are 47 times more likely to commit violence against a white person than a white person is to a Black person, but that it bears out that there's more.
That doesn't explain that you would get a harder sentence for being a white person.
No, what this is complaining is it says that white victims, the people that kill white victims,
get a higher sentence.
Actually more likely to get the death sentence, correct?
More likely to get the death sentence than if they kill a Black person.
Okay, so what the disproportion of that would be, those two things seem to not jive, because would you agree the majority of people that kill white people are white?
Yeah.
Okay, so how could it be then that if that white people are less likely to get the death sentence, but people that kill white victims are more likely to get the death sentence?
Simple. People don't care as much when a little Black girl dies when a little white girl dies.
No, but then that would seem to suggest if the majority of white people are killing white victims, these
two things can exist at the same time. Whereas when a white person kills a white person, they can get a somewhat harsher sentence. But when that's compounded by the fact that when you're Black and you killed a white person, so you got the one point against you for you being Black and possibly being on death row, then you killed a little white girl, you're fucked. You're on death row. Right, you killed any white person.
And that's exactly the point I was making. So perhaps sentencing is harsher when there's an interracial crime, because the idea of the possible hate and racial hatred that occurred during that.
Do you have anything to back that up?
Why? So it seems that Black people that kill white. Do you have any statistics on white people that kill Black people and whether or not they get harsher sentences?
There's been no data whatsoever to ever show that.
Why isn't that collected?
Because it would be like me collecting if the sky's purple. It's like, there's no evidence of it.
It's very rare. It's actually very rare.
It's more likely that they're going to actually get a lower sentence, actually.
Right, does the data show that?
Yes, the data shows it. The data I'm talking about right now. Because, like I said, if someone kills...
I'll look at it.
Okay, I'll get the links for you. It's actually...
Sure.
It's in my notepad. Let me see if I can find it. It's from a few days ago. I think it's from the... is it from the ACLU, which sourced it from the University of Maryland. Okay, one second. So that's actually my college. One second.
Anyways,
let me explain the data quick. So basically, it's the idea that if you kill a white person, you get a higher sentence than if you kill a black person. Therefore, if a white person kills a black person, they're more likely to get a lesser sentence than if a black person kills a white person.
The data show that.
The data shows that.
It specifically says white people that kill black people.
It specifically says that if it is a white victim, you're going to get a higher sentence. That includes white people killing white people.
That's not answering. That's not answering.
Yes,
the question.
that is answering the question. That talked about
no,
white
it's
victims.
not because it's two different.
That includes white people
killing
white people.
Hold on, guys, hold on. Okay, so Rob, go ahead and respond, and then we'll go back to Dylan.
Right, because a very plausible explanation for that could be that when we have cross-racial homicides, those people are more likely to get the death sentence. And again, let me ask you this: does the data show this? If you kill a woman, are you more likely to get the death sentence?
Yes,
if you're a female murder?
Most certainly, I would say something
okay,
like that.
actually, and the numbers show that in almost all these criminal justice statistics...
Hold on, Rob, hold on. Because you responded to something Dylan said, so let's throw it back to Dylan. I don't want to, because Dylan's writing stuff down. I don't want that to happen. So go ahead, Dylan.
I'm looking for a University of Maryland study. And I got off the civil rights movement. So I don't even remember where the fuck I was before. I didn't get I wrote down black.
I'm gonna say that.
Oh, the only note I have down, I wrote it so fast, I was so confused. I wrote down Black God, which I have no clue what the hell that was supposed to mean. I said Black God equals civil rights. I have no clue what that means.
Okay, okay, then go ahead, Rob.
Okay, so the point is this: the data shows that actually the criminal justice system and the disparity between blacks and whites is not near as severe, 6 times less severe than the difference between men and women.
Second, let me just get that study for you because I just don't want to be getting study while you're talking because then I'm just gonna fucking try to be doing 2 things at once. That's penalty,
so, and I'll put the study up. I'll put the study up that shows the discrepancy between sentencing, all of the issues that you're talking about, is 6 times worse between men and women than it is between blacks and whites. So if we have a group that this criminal justice system is 6 times...
Hold on, for me to get this. I don't know what's even happening. Yeah. I don't know what you're saying.
So, I can't listen. So just real quick,
we'll just take a break.
Yeah, so it's a great talk so far. Really informative. I think where the disconnect here is, Dylan believes that everything happening revolving around Black Lives Matter, even the violent stuff that happened. He believes it's obviously it's not okay, but you're kind of quote unquote justifying it because it's it's relative to civil rights and etc. And Rob is saying that that's not on par with the civil rights era, and then that I feel like that's where the disconnect is. So I'm just gonna throw that out there. Maybe it'll help us attack the actual core disagreement.
This study was conducted. I'm trying to find the actual PDF document, but it's gonna end up being 200 pages, so it's gonna be almost pointless for me to give it to you. But the study was commissioned by the Maryland governor at the time, and it was done by the University of Maryland, which is our own flagship university. And it found that defendants are much more likely to be sentenced to death if they have killed a white person.
Okay.
That means they're comparing if somebody kills a white person compared to if they killed a black person. So do you not see, right, in that isolated statistic that human, not even black, white, just human, kills black person, lower sentence. Human kills white, black person, kills white person, higher sentence. How that isolated? That's racist. There's something wrong there.
No, it doesn't prove that at all.
Oh, okay then.
What? Why? There could be significant reasons. Again, let me talk about give me 2 minutes to explain this. So you're saying this study says 2 things. One, if it's a black perpetrator that kills someone, they're more likely to get death sentence.
It's not even black perpetrator. It's just person kills white person. Person kills black person.
Oh, so it doesn't say a black perpetrator is more likely to get the death sentence than a white one.
When somebody kills a white person, you get a higher sentence than if you kill a black person. Saying that they're prioritizing white victims over black victims of crime. So not only, usually the reason why I'm bringing this argument up is people only talk usually about black defendants and never about the times when black people are the victims and how they actually get less attention and less convictions for people killing them compared to white people.
So all's that study, just to clarify this, right?
Hold on, just to clarify what Dylan was saying. Hold on. So Dylan, just so we're clear, the study you're throwing out it's suggesting that when a white person is killed, the sentence is greater or worse, and when a black person is killed, the sentence is more lenient, correct?
Yes, and this is just person, right? And that's why it's like this is so bizarre to me. Just hear that statistics on his face. It should be. I don't know how
great. Okay, so it doesn't talk about the skin of the perpetrator. It's just the victims, correct?
Yes, it's just the victims.
Okay, who kills the majority of white people?
White people.
Oh, so then the criminal justice system is more likely to give white perpetrators the death sentence than black ones.
They're isolating it. Just wait. So your thing is wait a second. Let me respond to that before you're like, I've defeated Dylan. He's a dumb fuck. Okay, so you're saying that the problem with my thing is if you look at this, it's black people mostly killing black people. So what you're saying is that black people is actually getting harsher, lenient sentences because they're the ones that kill the majority of black people. They're isolating the study though. They're isolating the study to just look at people killing it. They're not like doing let's look at 20 black people doing it. They're just doing it across racial lines to figure out what this is. And they find that across the board, anywhere, that's the case.
Your study is saying, like, you acknowledge that most black homicide victims are killed by black
because the problem with what you're proposing is if that was true, then my other study would have to be on these two studies, which have been shown by multiple universities. The reason why the thing that you're proposing seems so bizarre to me is because then. And either you're going to say this to be as like a rejection of my argument because then I'm being counter. Right. I'm being counter. But my thing is I think both of these things are true at the same time. But you're going on the idea that instead of the fact when we see data that suggests, when you're a black person, you're more likely to go on death row. And you're more likely to get harsher sentencing. You're more likely to get all this. And when they're a black victim, you actually get lighter sentencing than if it's a white victim. And instead of looking at all that data and saying, maybe there's some racist elements here, your suggestion is actually either one of these numbers are wrong, even though they've been done by multiple universities, and this seems to be pretty concrete. Either one of these things are wrong, or the statistics or something. Like I think, like the answer to this question would easily, your view is racism the answer there. Racism is the answer there.
I mean, I can't, I just can't believe, you're hemming and hawing, but I'm just taking your study. You're using one study that's talking about death sentencing figures. You're choosing to focus on the victim, and you say, when the victim is black, the perpetrator is less likely to get the death sentence. But if you focus on the perpetrator, that literally means the inverse. If the perpetrator is black, they're less likely to get... I was very clear. I thought at first you were saying both, which is why I was talking about interracial murders, and perhaps those are what's So just to get back on topic, since we've gone through this rigmarole, again, men are 6 times more likely to be adversely affected by the criminal justice system compared to women than blacks are compared to whites. Do we have a misogynistic or a misandrous criminal justice system?
Yes, we do.
Okay, and it's 6 times worse.
No, so as somebody who deals with men's issues all the time, so that's an issue. And you want to campaign on that? Sure. For example, a big thing for me is how male rape victims don't get the attention they deserve. A big thing for me is how men are not seen as good parents and they usually lose in court. Even if they're making good income, they're doing good things. These are issues for me. I think we can be good on both of these issues. In some areas it's misandrous, in some areas it's racist. And the thing is, are you willing to accept the idea that it is, do you think it is misandrous? Do you think our criminal justice system? No. Well, I think there. So why'd you even bring up this point?
Well, because we know.
Did you think I was about to say no? It can't be. I love women, or I'm a feminist.
Because you're why do you think that men are 6 times more likely to be convicted of crimes, to be pulled over for crimes, etc.? What do you think do you think you just say, well, if the data shows that it's misandry, you don't think there could be another explanation?
A lot of these studies that you're talking about, I know what you're talking about. Though we do actually have a lot of misandry in our criminal justice system. Is if a man commits the same crime as a woman, the woman is isolating the crime. I am a woman. I killed a man, beat him to death horribly. And you get another man. I beat that woman, I kill him, do this horrible thing. Put him on here, most statistically, the man is likely to get a harsher sentence than the woman. That's what a lot of these studies isolate. If it was just overall, but when you isolate these studies, it is showing that courts view women as caregivers. They view them as they have children in the home, or it's just poor girl that made a mistake. And while the men, it's this brutal animal that can't be condemned. We got to throw him away. That is a legitimate thing that exists in the criminal justice system.
Let's go.
I'm only going to fight this bullet.
Okay, if that's the argument, and it's 6 times worse, why is the focus only on Black Lives Matter instead of Men's Lives Matters, which are disproportionate?
Wait,
6 times worse than Black Lives Matter.
Do we have to call it? Okay, we don't need to call it Men's Lives Matter, but we can talk
Why not?
about.
It's 6 times worse.
Because
no one seems to want to
it feels like people are making the Lives Matter thing as kind of like a counterance to Black Lives Matter rather than its own movement. If you want to talk about this, I will have you on my stream to talk about men's issues any time of the week. I have probably on Twitch talked about men's issues more than any other fucking streamer on Twitch.
Okay, that's fine.
I mean, if you look at my Twitter description,
I've seen you talk about it.
It says rape survivor, and the reason why it says rape survivor is because I don't think men get enough representation when it comes to rape victims, for example. Like these are legitimate issues, and so like I'm willing to bite the bullet that yes, I think our criminal justice system is.
We're talking about whiteness and how it's used, and the idea that like race is so prevalent in almost every area of society today, and you're admitting right here, actually, the mistreatment of men is 6 times worse than the mistreatment of blacks. Well, yeah, where's the movement? Okay. Where's the corporate movement? Where do we have people in Capitol Hill that are talking about this?
Because I think people have less sympathy towards men, and I think that needs to be something that needs to be fixed.
Well. Okay, but it's 6 times worse. We can agree.
Wait, okay, so the problem I have with declaring it 6 times worse is because you're isolating it in one instance. Whereas in men of all races, where we're not talking about other aspects when it comes to how black people are treated in the country. So I'm not willing to say the condition of men is 6 times worse than the condition of black people, because number one, black people, listen. Black people include black men, so that means they get double the shitter. So if you're a black man, oh, you're fucked. Because not only do you got the race thing against you, not only do you got your gender against you, and then if it's a white victim, oh, dude, get the chair ready. You better get like some generators in the prison because you're gonna fry. So yeah, I agree.
Again, really quickly, let's try to intertwine like what we're talking about, because I feel like the disconnect here is Dylan saying this is some systematic racism, and Rob is saying no, it doesn't have to be systematic racism. Maybe it's X, Y, and Z.
That would have been the debate.
So Dylan, let's just agree on some terms. So I mean, like, what do you define as like systemic racism, and then maybe we can go off there and maybe meet halfway.
I think the thing is, what I'm describing right now is called intersectionality. The idea that like these things can stack on top of each other legitimately. For example, and okay, Rob, if we described it in any other way, like let's say someone's a homeless, poor rape victim. These bad things that have affected you stack on top of each other, because not only are you a rape victim, but you're homeless. You can't go to a secure location to recover. You can't get the resources. You're poor. You can't get a therapist. All these experiences stack on top of each other to have a worse experience. Whereas if you're a black man in this country, the system doesn't like you because you're a man. The system doesn't like you because you're black. And if it's a white victim, good luck, buddy. So that's the kind of thing I'm building here, where we have data to prove that when they're white victims, you're more likely to get sentenced at a higher rate. Black people are more likely to get sentenced at a higher rate. And men are more likely to get sentenced to a higher rate. So it seems that black men in this country have gotten a shit end of the stick and are almost viewed like these animalistic beasts in wider culture.
Okay, so a lot saying there and it's just totally irrelevant to the point. This is always what you see. So you always see this one niche thing that we want to focus on. So Black Lives Matter is focused basically on law enforcement and with their mistreatment in the black community, correct? We could agree on that. That's the primary focus.
That would be the primary focus, yeah.
Okay, right. We can see that men compared to women are treated 6 times worse by the law enforcement system than blacks compared to whites. So when this is pointed out, instead of saying, holy shit, then why don't we have 6 times as much of a movement with this incredible disparity against men? Instead, it's, but if we use intersectionality, we can see black men are worse. Fair enough, then let's say that. Then the movement should be Black Men's Lives Matter, because black women are actually treated better than white men. So all of the black women you see that are out there talking about Black Lives Matter, they actually, real quick, they actually have more privilege. If we're using intersectionality, they actually have more privilege when it comes to the law enforcement system than white men. So it goes black men, then white men. This is how insane and stupid it is. Meanwhile, we know that the idea of rejecting whiteness, and we can see it's not just, you talk about the privilege and about the things that they have, and this, that,
by the way, can I ask you, wait, that study you showed me, how does black men compare with white men in that same study when it comes to sentencing?
Right, it says that there's a disparaging.
That black men have it even worse. So you have to agree with this. That black men are sentenced higher.
I'm not disagreeing with the data. I'm saying there could be reasons behind the data.
Okay.
Right. Like, for example, do you think, for example, let's take the idea of like parking tickets and things like that, speeding tickets. They say disproportionately, black people are more likely to get speeding tickets than white people, but it's less, it could theoretically be less about the skin color and more about the geographic location. If you have more cops in an area because there's far more violent crime occurring in that area, then there's probably more likely the more cops you have to have a direct proportion to how many other sorts of tickets that they're giving out. Right? And there's other things like that. When you have people that commit crimes.
There's a okay.
Right, like,
gotta give me a second to respond. Here. You're giving a lot of. I got to ask like one question, and then you got back into like back on track and keep going. Okay, so the thing that gets me about this is it feels almost like mental gymnastics, where and there's like seems to be a pretty clear answer that will explain all of why all these disparities across all of society. Right? It would explain why white victims get a lower sentencing rate. It would explain why in that same study you source, black men still get a worse stick than the white men. A thing that explains why while white people and black people smoke marijuana at the same rates, black people get the shit end of the stick on that one too. All these just across all of society, that seems to be the case. And your thing is, well, maybe in this instance, it was actually, it was because of 1350. It was the 13, and when you look at the actual crime rates, it was here. And when you look over here, maybe it was because it was actually black people doing this to the white victims, to black victims. So that's actually black people getting lower sentencing. And you're going through all these studies and like finding these like weird explanations for it. When the clear, I think Occam's razor applies very clearly here. Like the very clear explanation seems to be that racism seems to permeate our criminal justice system, and you just seem to not be able to accept any answer that could possibly say that. Even in your own study shows that black people get the shit out of the stick there.
But showing data that shows that one group is disparaged or traditionally gets a higher sentence or something like that, that data doesn't point that the explanation automatically has to be racism. It could, but we should interrogate all the reasons behind it, which is exactly why you bring up the point about, I give you plenty of time to talk, which is exactly why you get to the point of men. So if we could see, okay, if we're accepting that all we do is look at the data and then we say bigotry is the example, if there's a discrepancy in data, then the justice system is 6 times worse against men than blacks. Or 6 times worse against men. The difference between men and women's treatment of justice system 6 times worse than that of blacks to whites. But again, like getting back to the conversation we're having about whiteness, again, this happens all over the place, right? No one's talking about the same people that talk about whiteness also talk about the patriarchy and how bad it is. That's what intersectionality is about. Yeah. It's about demonizing groups but for some reason, when they say, yes, that's exactly what it's about. So therefore, we could see the conversation of whiteness. How many people after this recent shooting in Atlanta said this was about white supremacy? How many people after the January 6th thing said it was a white supremacist insurrection? How many people after the Colorado shooting said, oh, this is an example of white supremacy? Even when it's an Islamic person that's shooting up 10 white victims, they still say it's an example of white supremacy. Then we have people on Capitol Hill that are saying
so many things. You say so many things. Like it's just a thing it's like a big shootout. Okay, so let me respond to these things. Okay, so my thing of intersectionality wasn't made just to make like white people the devil. Okay, intersectionality was made to explain the lived experience of people in more ways than one. Because I am not just a white man, Rob. Is that all I am? No. I am also somebody who has gone through poverty, rape, assault, all these things in my life, right? And these have had effects on me. And when you stack the experience of rape on top of the experience of man, then that means how you're treated is completely different. That means when I add these two factors together, that not only do I have to deal with the fact that I had to go through that terrible experience, but I have to deal with the fact that people are going to laugh at me for going through that terrible experience. They're going to treat me differently. And so that's what intersectionality is. It's to explain that lived experience. And to the other thing you were saying, and I would say, so here's a great example, and I think the one thing that I've yet to ever get an explanation for, and the thing that I think is the silver bullet. Have you ever heard of the Sun study?
No.
The Sun study basically is, and you talked about this in your own thing, and so you already acknowledged this, that black people get pulled over at a higher rate than white people, right? Mm-hmm. And you would explain that, well, the reason why is probably because, they commit crimes at higher rates, right?
I would say that it's probably I would say that because there's more police in black-centered locations, that would explain the discrepancy, yes.
Did you know the Sun study showed that during nighttime, when you couldn't actually see the person's race, black people getting pulled in over dramatically decreased? It was then about equivalent.
I heard this before. I didn't know that was called the Sun study. Again, I don't know that shows proof of racism.
Okay, so when you can see their race, they get pulled over at a higher rate. When you can't see their race, they get pulled over at the same rate. what could it? What is it gonna be like? Maybe it's like they think like what could it else possibly be? I'm actually a little aghast here.
Well, I would have to read this study and see. It could be an example of racism. I don't know. The question does racism, I'm fully acknowledged that there could be racial things that occur in law enforcement and things like that. My problem is with the assumption that every difference is solely explained by racism and there's not other differences in it, and how this is used. And we can see if people embrace that idea, then you have to admit that more than law enforcement's racist, it's misandrist. And yet the conversation we're having is about whiteness.
Right now. Reach out. Let's shake hands.
Okay, right. So then there we go. Okay, the law enforcement 6 times more misandrist than it is racist, and yet we only talk about whiteness. We don't talk about misandrist. We don't talk about the violence.
This. I've talked about this a million times over. We should talk about that. Topic but again, we should talk about both things.
Great. So the topic is, why is there so much focus on whiteness and how it's used? Now, you talk about intersectionality, and it was actually used to explain experiences. The truth is, when you're talking about I'm white and I'm a victim, the truth is you're an individual. And that's what is seek to be destroyed by the concept of intersectionality. The way it's used is to have a progressive stack that's often used by people that want to embrace things like critical race theory and feminism, because they understood, and I've seen this myself in collegiate debate, that there becomes a conflict when women say, this country is misogynist and patriarchy is the root of all problems. And then someone stands up and says, no, this country is racist and racism's the root of all problems. How do you get those people into a coalition? You say, well, we look at all of these things as how we could coalesce around saying all of the parts of us that have been victimized are important, and we look at your unique situation. So again, when we're talking about whiteness today, I haven't even got to any of the statistics. We talk about how whiteness is such a problem, violence is such a problem.
Wait, can I respond to your earlier statement about individuals?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
So I am an individual, but individuals are also part of wider systems. And the fact that I'm a man has impacted how I've been treated. It has. That's why that's shown in data, like you've brought up yourself. It's shown in wider culture, and how Terry Crews was reacted to in comparison to any woman that comes forward talking about rape. Not rape victims are generally like this whole like of disbelief or sometimes mocking, but men especially are treated in a different manner and have different solutions. And that intersectionality of me not only being a victim of this thing, but also a man had an impact there. And that isn't only just trying to be like, no, nobody has free consciousness, no one has this. But individuals are part of a wider system, and we need to acknowledge the impact those systems have on the individual, which is what intersectionality is ultimately trying to address.
No, and we can see what the systems are doing. So systems aren't just politics. Systems are our cultural institutions as well, which politics is actually downstream from culture. So we can see that almost every major system in this country is embracing the idea of rejecting whiteness. And we can see that like the idea of white people being increasingly violent and they're the real group that we have to go after and this and that. It doesn't match up with the data. We can see that people of color on average are far more likely to commit mass shootings, far more likely to commit homicides, far more likely to commit gun crime, far more likely to commit hate crimes. And what's that?
Why is that?
What does it matter? It's always an excuse.
No,
right? Racism.
No. I'm asking you.
Right,
why do you think? Is it racism? No, I'm asking you.
That's what you're going to say, right? It's racism, right?
I'm asking you, Rob. I'm asking you to have why do you think it is that they commit these things at a higher rate? I'm asking you because do you think it's their genetics? Say that it's like. Do you think they have like the warrior gene?
I've never once made the genetics
argument.
So
what is it?
I would say that probably the most likely reason is poor communities that are in high population areas. That means it's more about a geographic location than it is a skin color. For example, a white person that lives in inner city Chicago is probably more along the lines of what we see with the statistics when it comes to blacks committing violence versus whites than a black person that's living in rural Pennsylvania.
So why is it that like black people, no matter what community in, they're almost 99% of the time part of the poor community? They're all rich white people, but statistically, that seems to be the case. And I think the obvious explanation there was that black people have had less time to build up wealth. This is just basic economics. Most people, this doesn't mean all people, because again, we are individuals within a system, which is what I think intersectionality actually acknowledges. They haven't had time to build up the generational wealth of other people. And things like redlining still have effects today. People have lived. There are people alive today who have been directly impacted by redlining. And them having kids, and you being a poor family affected by redlining, having kids, your kids aren't just going to get money like that. And I think that would be, even though I guess I'm biting the bullet again and saying racism, dropping the truth bombs, dropping the truth bombs like Trump did on Yemen. And I'm trying to just show here that racism. So
you think it's strictly the reason that more crimes are committed on average by black people is strictly poverty?
Is not strictly, but it's one of the main reasons.
Okay, well, again, like the problem is we just talk. Then what you're focusing on is class problems. If we want to solve
class and race. That's two things combined.
No, because then
because they didn't have money because they were black because they were enslaved.
So we come to the real crux of this. So apparently, let's say that I'm a white farmer. Let's say theoretically, and let's say my family's been tilling the land for the past 100 years, and they weren't victims of redlining or Jim Crow, but through circumstances out of their control. Back in the 70s, the great grandfather had a difficult time with the farm, and now they've been struggling as a single farmer to get by. COVID has devastated them. Now here's a black farmer. This black farmer's family actually was affected by redlining, Jim Crow, etc. Now they exist today, and because of COVID, they've also been economically devastated. They're both devastated economically at the exact same position right now. Our federal government has decided to provide more relief to one of those farmers based on their skin color. That's racism. That's what rejecting whiteness does, because it allows you to say, oh, instead of focusing on the problem, we'll focus on the problem and something else. Which ends up, this is how the idea of rejecting whiteness is used to apply real racism today. And it's how the concept of intersectionality is used to screw over the real problem, people that are suffering from class. Why shouldn't we be, the monies we're giving out to poor farmers, why shouldn't it directly be to the farmers that are poorest and need it the most?
Okay, so you didn't address anything I said. Instead, you compared, say, well, this logic leads to this, instead of tackling the idea, even if you disagree with how this is being addressed. If my idea is true, it is undoubtedly true that black people were enslaved in this country. It is undoubtedly true that segregation occurred. It is undoubtedly true that when the Great Depression happened and when recessions happen, black people are usually the first to be fired because they're not as protected by unions at the higher rate. That is historical fact when it comes to the Great Depression.
Debate. What's the topic here?
It is
rejecting whiteness.
It's whiteness, but then you were like, what whiteness is just used to demonize black people. It's like, well, no, I think this concept has to do with the issue. It has to find issues that whiteness has caused in society when it comes to standards. For example, I think the idea of black people being lazy has impacted their employment rates. When it comes to why do black people have lower callback rates when it comes to their names being the only thing on the resume compared to white names?
May I? Well, we just read from the very organization that you used to define whiteness that hard work ethic is part of whiteness.
You think that's the reason?
That's exactly.
You think it's critical race theory? You think critical race theory caused that?
Listen, I don't disagree with you that there's a bunch of negative stereotypes and things like that. When we're telling certain communities, oh, the Eurocentric model, like the Enlightenment, that's whiteness. Oh, wanting to study hard and work hard, that's whiteness.
This is one graphic,
wanting to show
by the
up
way.
On time is whiteness. This shit's taught all the time. And
this is the core. This infographic is the core teaching of whiteness in all school. Like if I go to school on whiteness, it'll be like, all you need is this graphic, buddy. Nothing else.
Right. So it's right. So I think it's funny that the very organization that gave the definition that you wanted to use, you're now running away from.
This is not even. Wait. Number one, this organization didn't exist when this graphic was created in 1990.
They posted this as something they believe.
Where did they post this? Where did they post it? And plus, I gave you their definition from their website. And instead of using their definition from their website, you want to run with a graphic made before they existed that they might have posted once by some dumb staffer. And not to mention, like, again, this is a term that is definitely, I would say, different to different people, the same way terrorism is used differently by different people. So, again, like, we were trying to talk about the effects of... So, by the way, did you concede the idea? Not concede, let's say, do you agree with the fact that black people, when it comes to the issue... What did I... Aftershock, what did I say before we got to this? It was about a specific instance of racism. I said before this, before we pivoted again. We pivoted, like, I've broken my ankles.
Oh,
racism.
I remember what you were saying. Oh, weren't you saying? Oh yeah, about unions. Were you talking about unions that like black people are far more
stops
to get fired because they're not protected by unions as much? Like
whatever. I lost it. Well, anyway, all these things exist here, and we're trying to talk about why there's a discussion about whiteness. And even though this isn't the exact definition, I agree. And by the way, whiteness, I guess, wouldn't be bad in all of its aspects necessarily, but this is one definition we're working off of. For example, if you said, I tried to make this point earlier in the discussion, when you said terrorism bad, I could say to you, you fucking hate America, Rob. I can't believe you would turn your back on the founding fathers like that.
Okay, yeah, I concede. So we should reject blackness, right? Cool. You wouldn't have a problem with people saying reject blackness, right?
What aspect of blackness is bad?
No, when I say reject blackness, I'm talking about like things like homicide that occur. But if someone else says reject blackness and it becomes a big national movement,
I would disagree with the definitions. I would disagree with the definitions. For example, if somebody said, I love terrorism, and I just said, well, definitions mean nothing, I would just say, I disagree with that definition. I think the definition's dumb, and I don't think it has any purpose. But it seemed like you wanted to go through like a list of things that were good and bad. And by the way, this is supposed to go for 2 hours, and you wanted to ask questions after Shock, right?
I real quick, I was just gonna let you guys go like until the time, because all the questions that I'm seeing are like crazy loaded. So I have one that I got, but
put them in the chamber, fire them off. We're doing truth bombs today. We're doing truth bombs. I mean, if words mean nothing, then yes. If words mean nothing, then yes.
Reject blackness, right?
If words mean nothing, then
you would have a problem. You would have a problem because you would say, "Oh, there's a."
Because I think the definition is wrong. Because I think the definition.
What's wrong about it? You haven't even asked what I mean by it.
Because I know it's okay. Okay, Rob. What is your definition of blackness then?
When I say reject blackness, I just mean black on black crime.
Oh well, then I'm fine. I'll reject that version.
All right.
Of it.
So let's start that. You'll join me in the national movement to reject blackness.
As long as you agree that you support terrorism, Rob.
No, what does that have anything to do with?
Because they're the founding fathers, they boast of that. If it's political, because if
why are you okay?
Wait a minute. You say multiple.
Hold on,
whoa,
guys, real quick. Dylan, whoa, guys. Okay, Dylan, go ahead.
I'm gonna do a Rob Noerr. This is the hypocrisy of the right. The hypocritical right strikes again. So you talk a lot about how Antifa busting up windows is terrorism. How this because your definition of terrorism is violence for political means. You going out there being violence, damaging property. The founding fathers did violence for political means. Under your definition of terrorism, that is terrorism. They went up there, busted up some things of teeth, threw it into the ocean. They're damaging property, damaging a private people and a nation's property in order to do political means of protest against the nation. That, under your definition, would still be terrorism, but you refuse to call them terrorists. And the reason I bring calling this out is I think that definition of terrorism is wrong. And I'm saying that, so under this definition, I would have to say that you support terrorism in some instances. And that's why I think this word game is completely, useless.
No, here's the word game. So, real quick to respond to this. No, comparing what happened today
After this, can we take questions?
Party all right, comparing that to the Boston Tea Party, etc., is different. The truth is, you're saying you accept the fact that when it comes to whiteness, people could mean many different things, right?
Yes.
But you're okay with the concept of rejecting whiteness. But with rejecting blackness, you would say, I have a problem with that because I don't agree with your definition. The truth is, and you won't admit it because you're being disingenuous, you know that there's a racial connotation to the idea of rejecting blackness, just like there's a racial connotation when it comes to rejecting whiteness. And you know that many people could use the idea of rejecting whiteness in a racial connotation of rejecting white people. That's why you hear them spreading bullshit stories about white people. We don't feel safe with white people and gun in supermarkets. We'll only confirm candidates that are black or LGBT. We're not going to confirm white ones. We're going to give farmers that are black, even if they're more well-to-do than white farmers, we're going to give them extra monies, right? You're accepting of a term that you know has racial connotations, but if we inverse it, which I would never say reject blackness because I know it's horrible and that it will be used by people to attack black people, which is bullshit. I don't accept racist attacks like that. You do, and as does most of our cultural institutions.
Can we take questions now?
Yeah, for sure. Dylan, did you want to say any closing anything?
I'm a traitor to my race, whatever. We're just gonna go back and forth. Somebody will bring it up in questions and I'll answer it again.
Sure. All right. So, some of them got away because, I said, they were pretty loaded, and I'm still taking some that are kind of loaded, but not as much. Okay. So
I make them loaded. I want it to be so loaded it blows me away. You got double barrel shotgun. I should be out the window.
Okay. So let me. I got another one here. Okay. Cool. So let's do this one. So from Bacon Strong. This is one of the ones that were kind of neutral. Okay. Is it racist that the system gives lighter sentencing for people who kill black people?
Yes. Done.
Rob?
That was easy for me.
I would say that no, that's not proof that it's racism. And if the majority of black people are killed by black perpetrators, then that means that there are less death sentences for black perpetrators than white perpetrators. So if you think it's racist in the context of black victims and the people that kill them get a lesser sentence, then you could also say it's racist the other way that black perpetrators are less likely to get the death sentence.
Okay. All right. So from the real Bruised Lee, it says, question for the panel, and this is a little bit long, so bear with me. If cultural wealth is an issue for Black Americans and has existed for decades, how are modern day Africans that immigrate to this country showing far greater increases in wealth and success within 10 years of being in this country? Same for Chinese, Japanese, Indian, Pakistani, etc. What is so different about these people that is allowing them to be successful? Do you think it is related to culture and a victimhood mindset?
Nah, I got a great answer for this. So a lot of people, I don't think it's a victimhood mindset. I think it's basic economics. When you have people coming from a continent that is not directly connected to you, definitely when you talk about African immigrants, we talk about the on average education that these people coming over. We're talking doctors, people who are at the top of the profession. And if you're taking basically a continent's best and bring them to your country, of course they're going to perform better than basically everyone in your society, including white people. And this is actually an argument I'll use all the time when debating like race realists, that African immigrants are a great example on how there's no like white supremacists, like white people don't have like better brains or whatever. And the other thing I would also add is, since they are people who have studied and worked and been able to get an education in another continent and then come over here as the select few, they are also going to have more money and have more income and have more access to income through that employment. Whereas if you just take all of Black people in the United States, you're taking all the people, not just the wealthy and extremely like best college educated like types. You got to get all. So yeah, I don't think it's at all a victimhood mindset. I think it's just basic economics and immigration economics. I mean, this is why I love bringing. This is why I love immigration, is because a lot of times we're getting some of the best and brightest to help revigorate the American economy.
Just real quick, the person who asked that question did do a follow-up that says he's referring to specifically poor immigrants, not doctors.
He's referring to specifically poor immigrants, not doctors.
Yeah.
Okay, so is that a different study than the one I'm familiar with? I mean, like what do you mean? I guess it's because they have work visas usually, and if you have access to work visas and you still had the income enough to at least travel over here, then you have at least access to stable work. That could be a bunch of factors. I mean, I haven't seen a study that's literally only poor immigrants. It's usually just immigrants generally. I haven't seen that study before.
Okay, but it could be if I may, so I don't disagree that I think Dylan's actually, like, to be honest, like if you're looking at a population that's all people that are coming to universities and stuff like that, and their race is almost all that, then yeah, they're going to look better when it comes to economic viability and things like that than on average. However, two things to say in this. One, this also skews with white people, right? So the truth is there are a lot of people in positions at the top that actually have historical wealth and things like that that skew these statistics. When you start to look at lower income white people and lower income people of color, you can see that the treatment gets far more similar. The poverty levels get far more similar. The education level gets far more similar and things like that. So that's one. Secondly, like if we do have a white supremacist system, why would it tolerate so many the most successful Americans being immigrants from countries that aren't from Eurocentric countries, such as, I believe, Nigerians do better, Indians do better, I believe Jamaicans do better. All the people that are might immigrant from these countries end up doing. Why is it that our white system, why are Asian Americans that are third, fourth generation outperforming white Americans in almost every single standard? Why is that? And also, if we're going to be talking about, that's fine. I'll leave it there.
Can I respond to that, or?
Yeah, sure, but we're gonna have to go back to Rob because he.
Yeah. So the main reason I would give is I would say it's not simply just race that like dictates everything. I think there's this like idea that the left only like cares about race and just talks about race, wants to build this like racial like pyramid of like oppression Olympics. But the left cares about unions a lot. The left cares about labor a lot. Race and economics. Jay-Z has more money to me. Not just even though he's gonna face certain things in society that I'm not going to because he's black. Black people can still succeed despite all this stuff. A lot of instances. For example, if I have two like patches of trees and one built beautiful, just beautiful built that has perfect access to sunlight. Some of those trees are still going to die due to not having access to proper nutrients, bunch of other factors. But you have another factor of trees, and half of them are under like a dark shade. A higher rate of them are going to die. And so at the end of the day, what I'm trying to make with this analogy is nobody would expect that second patch to be able to succeed to the same standard, to just be like, pull it up by your bootstraps. So I think that when we talk about people who are successful and stuff like that, people can like succeed despite their race. And that's how we should view that.
Rob, did you want to respond?
Right. So then I wonder how Dylan would. What would you do to then articulate the discrepancy why Asian Americans are outperforming white Americans so much, if they're achieving despite their race?
Well, I mean, discrimination against Asian people is much different than discrimination against Black people. Like we're not talking about
discrimination. We're talking about, real quick, we're talking about almost all economic measures, incarceration measures, interactions with law enforcement, because all of the things.
The stereotypes that exist for Asian people are not the same. I mean, for example, when you look at comedians and they do jokes about Asians and Black people, it's not the same jokes, it's not the same stereotypes, it's not the same things, right?
What does that have to do?
Listen, the stereotypes, stereotypes in the way that society views people. We view Asians as a model minority. That's the usually word. The idea that they're hardworking, very smart, all these things, which can actually be still harmful to some people, because let's say you're not great at math and you're an Asian person, that people can view it, look at you very differently, or you can have different standards placed upon you. Of course, there's certain cultural things that can actually lead to success, but also it can be how society treats you. Because here's a great example: Asian names are going to get a higher callback rate than Black names. When you look at these studies on just isolating Black names and white names, and you like send them both back, Black names are not going to get the same amount of callback rate. As far as I know, there's no study indicating that Asian people would have that the same amount of lack of callback than Black people. There's different challenges that different communities face.
All right, okay, guys. Whoa.
No, I only asked that was asked.
Yeah, but you asked me a question.
I got like 10 seconds.
We're going to go on a huge like back and forth here to avoid as much like bias as possible. I'm going to choose a card. If it's red, Rob gets last word. If it's black, Dylan gets the last word. Black. There you go.
Hey, go ahead, Dylan.
Black. So no, well, that was his. Yeah. So let's move on. We're starting to get to the more. There's only like 3 left, but like we're starting to get to the more loaded ones. Okay. So Rob, Wasted Design wants the stats. He just wants the stats. Like, where is he getting the 6 times bullshit that he was referring to? And then I forgot who. Yeah. Go ahead.
That's from University of Michigan.
If you post it in the Discord, I'll post it in my
Yeah, so
my channel.
Professor Starr from the University of Michigan. It's from Michigan. www.law.michigan.edu.
Sure. So, okay. So I forgot who this is from, but he said, jokes aside, bias aside, phrase it however you want even, please ask Rob what he would need to see to believe there was racism. That was worded weirdly. To see and believe there was racism in our criminal justice system.
Well, it's not a matter of I don't believe that there's racism in our criminal justice system. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that the discrepancies that we see can't just all be described by saying, well, this is clearly racism. Because if we do that, then anytime we see a discrepancy, then we would say there's no need to interrogate that and see the reason. So I'm just saying that the burden on proof is to prove that it's racism, other than to just say, it's racist. For example, when we talk about Black people that are unarmed, Black people more proportionally to be shot by police than white people, there could plausibly be because there's more violence in those communities, which means police are more likely to respond with justified or unjustified violence. But we're told we're racist if we bring that up and we can't interrogate it. So let's say, for the sake of argument, that yes, there is some form of racism in our law enforcement system. Okay, how bad is that racism? What does that justify us doing? Does it justify talking about removing and rejecting whiteness? Does it justify us rioting in the streets? Where does the end of this justification? What other groups, if they're being disparaged more, what is their recourse? What are they going to do? And the truth of the matter is that the real problem in this country, the biggest group that's most affected is poor people. If Black people are disproportionately poor compared to others, I have no problem targeting and helping people that are poor. That's something that we should do. The people in charge, however, realize they can continue to work for a government that doesn't benefit any people as long as they divide us by race, which is exactly what happens. And you hear this argument Dylan makes, like, well, it's not just the poor farmer is poor, it's also that he's Black. Therefore, we only help poor Black farmers.
Well, no.
That's keeping us divided. That's what happened. Do you think that policy is racist?
That's not what happened. Because if that was the agricultural bill was not just for Black people. It was for Black people and also white people. But there were certain benefits directed at the Black community because of the history of sharecropping, the history of, well, I mean, Black people have a very shaky history with farming in this country, as I think we can all acknowledge. But definitely when it comes to, like, for example, when it came to like the Great Depression, or like any time like it was time to lay off workers, Black people are always the first. There's a reason why we have such a low rate.
Now.
Let me.
What does that have to do with now?
Because why is there so few Black people in farming? It isn't just you'll say geography, but it's also because it's a history of discrimination against Black people in the agricultural industry.
What does that have to do with if there's a so let's say we only have enough money to get totally out of debt the top 10 poorest independent farmers. And the 2 through 10 are all black. So we give them the money. But number 1, the poorest is white. But this policy is not focused on him, right?
He's going to get,
what does it matter the historical
too. What do you mean?
But nowhere near the benefits that the black farmers are getting. What does the historical reason?
Are you telling me that this bill says that a more impoverished white farmer will end up getting less from this bill than just like a middle income black farmer?
That's exactly what it says. It says
I'd have to re-examine that.
Right. It says that farmers of color can get up to 120% of their debt forgiven. That provision is not there for anyone except people of color or LGBT people. That's true. That's racism. That's what it is. And that's what happens when we focus on intersectionality. Right? So, explain to me if the problem you've made like 5 points. Quick, if the problem is poor farmers, why aren't we just focused on poor farmers? Why do we have to add skin color into it?
Okay, so I'm going to go back to the first point that we're just drifting away from that I never got to get to, okay? We never got to get to this first. You said you said that if you had clear evidence, and I've given you clear evidence on multiple occasions here, and you still found a way to reject it. Like, I gave you an instance where it was literally, you couldn't see black people's race, or you could see black people's race during the day, and you could see white people's race. Black people got pulled over at a higher rate. Then during nighttime, you can't see it, they get pulled over at the same rate. Showing that it isn't over-policing, showing that it isn't any of these other factors, this is it. And you didn't accept that. Are you willing to accept that?
I'm willing to accept that a possible explanation could be racist.
A possible explanation.
But I would have to see the study and look at exactly what happened. But it is a possible explanation. And what's the percentage? How much worse did it get at night?
How much worse? It got basically to the same rates as far as I'm aware.
All right, guys, this is going on for too long. Red, Rob, Black, Dylan. Black down. Okay, Rob. So finish.
Hey, I'm a poker king.
Hold on, Rob. So finish your point because I interrupted you, and then
that's
Dylan.
Fine. No, Dylan got the card. That's cool.
Okay. My final point will be that China was a great member of DX, and your earlier point today that they weren't a good member of DX is actually extremely wrong, and it shows a lack of knowledge in wrestling, which probably shows the amount of research you do into every topic.
I mean,
okay. Okay, cool. So last question on this one. From Pine Soul. Why do black males commit 52% of all homicides? 6% of the population commits 52% of homicides. If the number were white males, would you have a problem with it, Dylan?
If the number was white males, yes, I would have a problem with it. And I think the explanation is clear. Economics and intersectionality. Like I've given the proposal multiple times here. When you have less money, you're more likely to commit crime. This is true for everyone. And black people have some of the least amount of income in society. That's why when people talk about what black privileges, it's ridiculous to me because when your community is so impoverished, when your community is so discriminated against, when your community has so many things going against you, being able, getting the few things that you get with affirmative action is basically peanuts compared to it. So when you look at the history of slavery, redlining, employment discrimination that is still active to this day, the segregation, the history of Jim Crow, and their suppression as historically as a voting bloc, as they couldn't actually lobby for their parties due to poll taxes and other instances. It just probably shows pretty clear that I think that poverty and that discrimination is a pretty direct line, and I think it's very clear and it's the most obvious answer. And I would appeal to Occam's razor.
Rob, you get the last word on this since the last two where Dylan got the last word.
Okay, so, and the first word I had, but again, this doesn't address it because when we look at poverty and whites or people of other races that are at similar poverty levels as the blacks that he's talking about committing these crimes, we don't see that proportion of violent crime. Now, it's ironic because it's sad that Dylan left, but I understand sometimes you gotta go. It's ironic because Dylan actually talks about a possible explanation of this and he doesn't realize that he does it. So when he's talking about rhetoric and stereotypes and the expectations we set for communities, that's exactly right. And it's one of the things that I talk about all the time. When we have a perpetual victim mentality for people in inner cities and for black people, it does have a real effect that causes real bad things to happen in real life. He says that despite the fact that we have whiteness and we have a white supremacist society, other races can achieve despite that whiteness. So when we see something like Asians that are outperforming whites, and therefore, despite the system trying to be racist against them, Asians are outperforming, he says, oh, it's because of the way we talk about them. Well, let me ask you this. Which community community is doing the most harm, talking about black people as perpetual victims, saying things like the nuclear family, et cetera, all of the things that we showed the National African American Museum that they were talking about. Which community is saying that? We see this in academia all the time, sort of this bigotry of low expectations. And so, yes, that is a big reason why culturally we see so many of these differences. Dylan gives it away. He says the only reason we have a white supremacist society, the only reason Asians are outperforming white people is their culture.
I didn't say that. I said there's different stereotypes about them. There's different. I was supposed to get the last word, but I feel like that was like a question almost.
You're muted, bud.
I can't hear you.
This was another question, right?
Wait, was this? I had to go piss.
Yeah, this is another question. Yeah. This is another question, and I gave it to Rob because you had the last two.
Sure. So I'll just say this, and we can end it quickly. I think the idea that with the bigotry of low expectations, that the reason black people are failing in this country is because they don't believe in themselves enough is quite ridiculous. I think the answer is obviously in economics and social standards. There you go. That'll be it.
But I'll say real quick. Okay, you said that the reason that Asians
Rob has the last word on this. Just because you had the last two, so I'm giving this one to Rob.
Okay.
You said the reason Asians are succeeding despite white supremacy is the expectations we put on them. But now you say it's absurd to talk about the expectations we put on. But you did. Then okay.
I said cultural stand. I can't say.
Just a closing statement. Don't refer to anybody. Go.
Me or him?
Was that it, Rob?
Yeah,
Rob.
that's it.
Okay, cool. So that's gonna wrap up the topic. That was a great talk, you guys. Go ahead. We'll do Dylan first. Go ahead and do an outro and where they can find you about the hippy dippy and everything, and then Rob will go to you to do the same.
Hi, I'm an international arms dealer. I live stream shipments to Kabul, Afghanistan, assisting them. Rob has described me as apparently the modern day Dick Cheney and traitor to the white race at the same time. And you can now Rob Noerr has multiple occasions come to my home, banged on me, and called me a race traitor. He banged the door and he was like, "Race traitor!" multiple times.
Banged the door, not you.
Yeah, not me. You made advances, but I rejected them. Sorry, Rob. Even though you have a very lovely beard. So the fact of the matter is, if a lot of you probably out there was like, Dylan, this libtard, this kid, he doesn't know what he's talking about, and I pissed you off. And you know what? Good, I pissed you off. And you know what? I want to piss you off. I want to make you angry. I want you to go online and research and be like, you know what? I'm gonna find out why this little libcuck loser is so wrong. And then after you do the research, you'll be like, damn, well, I got nothing. His arguments, solid, hard, can't be penetrated. Top of the class. Nobody can outpace me. So you know what? You can come find those arguments. Those hardcore, top-tier arguments, just like how China performed in DX. At Dylan Burns TV on YouTube, DYLANBURNS TV.
Rob, go ahead.
So just to answer the last point there on China, like this, I will have a debate with you on this. Like, China was a good character in DX, but she was not a good performer or wrestler. She wasn't good at the art of wrestling. And the idea that they had her beat like actual Intercontinental Champion like Jeff Jarrett and beat Chris Jericho, that are legends, particularly Chris Jericho, is a joke. It's a joke. Now, hilariously, when Dylan's talking about, it's all, if you want to have that debate sometime, we can. Hilariously, Dylan talks about, the people listening. Most of the people listening to you thought you were wrong, but they didn't really have anything bad to say until you started getting cringe at the end there. But that's probably far more generous than your chat is to me. But I won't appeal to them or brag to them because I know they're not going to do any research anyway. So what's even the point of doing so? The point is, we had two topics. The China topic, we'll see. I think Biden is basically, his family's bought and owned by the Chinese. He didn't mention anything about COVID. He didn't talk about their interference into our election. And I think that we'll see that China will posture more. They're going to bully them around. On the second topic, it's, the contradictions are just amazing, right? The truth is, rejecting whiteness is about rejecting kind of white supremacy and things like that. So it stands for what it is. I'll talk about it afterwards. Lastly, I just want to say thank you very much. Dylan, I truly mean this. We disagree all the time, and I think you have some really bad takes, but I like you as a person, and I think it's incredibly generous of you to come on for the first episode of this. I thought it was good, and I'd welcome to talk to you anytime. So I do appreciate it.
Andre the Giant would be a bad wrestler under your definition, okay? Just gonna throw that out there. You disregard one of the most iconic people who built the business, and China's under same category there, okay?
Yeah, okay.
All right.
Same category of maybe not being the best technical wrestler, but extremely important for the business and industry, okay? Just want to make that very clear.
To be continued. Okay, so just to let everybody know, this is we're gonna come up with a better name, but as of right now, it's the Round Table with Rob Noerr. Every Wednesdays at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Next week we're going to have. So far we actually have the actual lineup. It's gonna be Rob Noerr and John Burke versus Joe Louis and GSU Gambit, and one of the topics for sure is going to be white privilege, because we wanted to so that's what we have lined up, and then the second topic is decided by the guests as per Rob's rules. So thank you guys so much. Dylan, again, thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate it, and great talk, guys. I'll see you guys later.
Awesome. See you guys later.
Take it easy. For my chat, I'll be sticking around here for a minute.